सभायै नमः, सभासद्भ्यो नमः। सर्वेभ्यः वैश्विक योगसत्र निमित्तं प्रति हार्दं स्वागतम्। अद्य अस्माकं सविधे सन्ति डॉक्टर अनुराधा चौधरी महोदयाः। अस्मान् उद्दिश्य संस्कृतस्य महत्त्वं, विशेषेण यौगिकप्रपञ्चे योग अभ्यासकाः ये सन्ति, योगक्षेत्रं यदस्ति तेषां कृते संस्कृतक्षेत्रस्य योगक्षेत्रस्य कृते संस्कृतस्य योगदानं किं, महत्त्वं किम् इति उद्बोधयन्ति डॉक्टर अनुराधा चौधरी। ताम् अस्यां वेदिकायाम् आह्वयामि। सस्नेहं च स्वागतं व्याहरामि। Swagatam, Dr. Anuradha.
Namaste, Vinaya.
Namaste, and I would like to welcome all our friends who have joined us this evening from across the world for this third session of the 30th day of the Global Festival of Yoga. We are at a point where we are reflecting and filled with gratitude because we set out this journey on 21st June, that is International Yoga Day, with the idea that we will have 3 sessions a day for 30 days. And when we set out, we weren't even sure how it will turn out. But at the end of 30 days, with all your support, with all your goodwill, we are, I think, at a very at a point where we are just filled with gratitude to everything, to everyone who made this a very successful event. And on this special occasion, we have with us our own Dr. Anuradha Choudry, who will be who has been with us as an anchor, but donning a different role today as the speaker, the main speaker today. She'll be speaking on Sanskrit as yoga and Sanskrit for yoga, a very important subject, a subject that is so dear to her and to many of us in this field. You have known her, you have known her skills, you have known how she connects with the audience as well as the speakers and how she brings the best out of each one of them that she comes across. So she doesn't need a very long introduction, yet I'll take a moment to introduce her formally. Dr. Anuradha Choudry is a joint faculty at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Rekhi Centre of Excellence and at the Rekhi Centre of Excellence for the Science of Happiness at the Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur, where she teaches Sanskrit, Indian psychology, French, and a course on mind and language sciences as a part of History of Science and Technology in Ancient India course. In 2019, that is last year, she was awarded the first ever Excellent Young Teachers Award for her contributions to the Institute and especially for how she had gained the goodwill of the students. I think one of the highly well attended classes, or both the classes of Sanskrit and French and Indian psychology, many people still wonder how is there so much interest for Sanskrit in a technological institute, but that is because of her and all credit goes to her. After her PhD in Sanskrit on Vedic Psychology, she received the prestigious Erasmus Mundus Scholarship of the European Union to do an MLitt in Crossways in European Humanities from the Universities of St. Andrews in Scotland and University of Bergamo in Italy. And that's where she also has mastered her Italian. You were all familiar with her French mastery, but she's also very good in Italian too, among many other languages. An alumna of the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, Pondicherry, she's a multilingual, passionate Sanskritist. I don't think this is a word enough to describe her, passionate Sanskritist. You can call her Sanskrit evangelist, Sanskrit. I mean, you should coin her because I just like to give you a taste. Before we start any session, we have a 20 to 30 minutes practice session, a test session before all these live sessions. And even there, as she's sitting there, she picks up our friends from the technical team and starts teaching them Sanskrit. So even if it's 10 minutes, she ensures they speak at least a few words. So that is Dr. Anuradha Choudry, a passionate Sanskritist who works in the areas of Indian psychology, yoga psychology, philosophy, culture, and travels across the world to deliver lectures and conduct workshops on these topics at national and international organizations and at events like the annual Yoga Congress of the European Union of Yoga in Zinal, Switzerland, among many, many others. In fact, she has a journey packed for nearly 3 months every year. And earlier, she was known as Sanskrit Gypsy. So, traveling just for Sanskrit with Sanskrit, that was her passport. So, she has published in various journals and has co edited and co authored books titled Perspectives on Indian Psychology and Happiness Indian Perspectives, respectively, along with myself. So, that's been my privilege to work with her for nearly 10 years now. And I also have this privilege of presenting her to all of you this evening and also listening to her. So with this brief introduction, I request Dr. Anuradha to take over from this point onwards and take us through an immersion in Sanskrit. Dhanyavad.
बहु धन्यवादाः विनयः भवतः हार्दं परिचयार्थम् अनुगृहीता अस्मि. So thank you very much, Dr. Vinayachandra, Vinaya, fondly, for your very heartfelt introduction, very generous words also that you have said about me. I would just like to start this session with an invocation to the Gurus and then followed by just the first part of the Laghunyasam. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Agnirme Vachi Shritaha Vaghridaye Hridayam Mai Aham Amrite Amritam Brahmani. So, namaste, dear yoga bandhavaha, yoga friends and family from across the world. It has been an immense privilege to be part of this journey of Indica Yoga at the Global Festival of Yoga to celebrate wellness. And for this, I am extremely grateful to Harikiran Vadlamani ji, who is the inspiration behind the entire Indica Yoga platform, and also to my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Vinayachandra, who has co-hosted this program along with me. I would also like to thank, at the onset itself, my parents, my very dear friends who have stood by me and supported me through thick and thin. I would fail in my duty if I did not mention Dr. Jinya Mukherjee, a very sturdy friend who's been here throughout the festival, practically feeding me, ensuring that I'm sleeping well, doing everything well. So it's a great privilege again to be able to present a topic of great love of mine to the international audience that we have on this platform. And thank you all so much for having joined us again this evening. So without much delay, I'd like to share my screen and go on to the topic, which is Sanskrit as yoga and for yoga. So this session that I was proposing is going to be part interactive. So please feel free to respond to me whenever I ask you any questions and do the exercises that I request you to join along with, because Sanskrit is a language that has to be experienced. One can talk about Sanskrit, one can talk a lot about Sanskrit, but when one experiences Sanskrit for oneself, then it's a world apart. It's another dimension altogether for oneself. So, moving on. I've been thinking about how best I can present the subject before you. And when thinking of what language really is, I recognize this fact that the story of language is essentially the story of sounds and vibrations. And for this, I'd like to take you through a certain exercise. So please join me for this exercise. So to start with, I'd like you all to close your eyes. Close your eyes, and I'd like you to put your attention on your physical body. In your physical body, I'd like you to focus your attention now on your heart. Think of the physical organ of the heart. And now start going deeper into it. So just as if you're zooming into the heart, zooming into every part of the heart, you're just zooming further and further and further into it. How far can you go? What is it that you find there? The deeper we go, we realize that there is less of gross matter and more of an energy substance. So go deep into it. Allow yourselves to arrive at the minutest particle of our being. And then try and spread that awareness to the whole of your being. And observe, what do you feel like? When you arrive at that subtlest level of your being, our being is nothing but an entity made up of vibrations and energy. I'd like you also at that same time to start observing your breath. What happens to the breath when it is connected to the subtle being? From the breath, I'd like you to start observing the vibrations of your emotions. Where really are your emotions? Observe minutely within yourself. Take your attention to your head and try and observe what exactly is a thought. Where do thoughts originate from? And then spread your awareness beyond yourself and connect to the world around you at that subtlest form of yourself, at that most fundamental form of who we are. We are nothing but patterns of vibrating energy. And in this experience, I'd like you to visualize the word Sanskrit. So bring your attention back to yourself and think of the word Sanskrit. And when you think of Sanskrit, become conscious of how this word impacts your being. What does it do to you emotionally? What does this word do to you mentally? What are the images that it evokes? What are the sensations it evokes? Does it give rise to preferences? Does it give rise to aversions? Are there any desires it gives rise to? And then try and do a zoom into the word Sanskrit itself and try to see, where does this word originate from? And I take you back to that question, where does thought originate from? And how do you connect to thought? And then I'd like you to start coming back to yourself. As you come back to yourself, I'd like you to start formulating more clearly the experiences you had. And then I'd like you to open your eyes and share with me what came to your mind. And as you're doing that sharing, I'd like you to observe the process that you undergo. So from the thought to the expression, what really is happening as an idea materializes and formulates itself into language? So I'd like you to open your eyes now and just share a few thoughts that would have come to you. Pratibha ji is saying deep knowledge. The word seems close to sanskara, evolution, all right, Gita ji.
Spiritual,
Spiritual.
right serenity.
Yes.
Janet says truth.
Yes.
Shashank Shekharji, purity. Dr. Namrata, a feeling that invoice want to say something. Anil Kumarji says deep sense of calmness. Meeraji says sweet sense of calmness. Plentitude. Dominic from Dominicoto. Prabita Bowler want to learn. Lisa says anchoring to one and else melts away and all else melts away. Sajanji says for me Sanskrit that was the vibration closest to vibrationless state. Thought wise just felt shunyam. Deep reverence, ancient wisdom, sanskar, divine bliss.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Vinayji. And thank you all for so generously sharing your experiences with us. I'd like you also to specifically note down next for me, what did the word Sanskrit evoke for you? Some of you have mentioned it specifically for Sanskrit. Others have talked about the entire experience that they went through right now. So what does Sanskrit really evoke for you? Purity? Yes? All right. So I'd like to continue with the slide. Some degree of awareness about being connected to everything, divinity, bliss. Thank you. Independent, pure platform for expressing my being to the world. Purity of thought. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Culture, passion. Beautiful. So I'd like to move on and take us through what I call the grand unified theory that I have understood from the world of sounds. So when we talk of sounds, at the origin, there was this idea from a Vedic perspective of the first vibration, the first being that wanted to have the experience of becoming many. So it says, Eko ham bahusyam, I am one, let me become many. It is like as if there was one light that broke into various shades, various frequencies, and became the rainbow. This picture I'm representing in this particular diagram. So it is as if originally there was the truth sound. So imagine that there is a truth sound and that is diversifying into multiplicity. So that original truth is what I would call as Satya. That Satya is now manifesting itself. And as it manifests itself and becomes more and more complex in terms of vibrations, it will then start acquiring what we call, in terms of our Pancha koshas, in its densification, it becomes the Vijnanamaya kosha. So it is the knowledge where intuition, there is a connection between the subtle and that is now becoming more and more concretized. That further gets complicated in terms of vibratory density and becomes the mind. I don't know if you can see my mouse. So it becomes the mind. It further gets dense and becomes the emotions. It further becomes dense and becomes the physical vibrations. So initially when the being is emerging into becoming, it has a rather simple nature, a purer nature, a connectedness with the original source in terms of its frequencies. As it evolves, it gets more and more complex, more and more embedded, and in its furthest reaches, it gets really like a noisy mess. In the Vedic culture, they talk of three things. They talk of these triad called the Satyam, the Ritam, and the Brihat. So I'm trying to present to you what this journey of a creation itself is based on the origin of sound. And there we see that it is connected to this triad of what I call Satya. Originally, when that Satya in manifestation is following exactly along the frequencies of that original blueprint of the ideal, then it is Ritam or the right. When the Ritam and the Satya match, then we have what you call the Brihat or the vast. All right, so there are blueprints, basically vibrational blueprints of ideals. There is a manifestation of that. When that manifestation is in tune with the ideal, then the experience is of the vast or the Brihat. But most often we are disconnected from the original blueprint of things, and that creates noise. So in the yoga tradition, they talk of the highest kind of mind being that of Ritam Bhara Prajna, to know that which is the right. That's the Ritam. And when one knows that, what happens within our being? in the being, we experience a kind of alignment, and that alignment is what yoga is all about. In terms of sounds, it represents noiselessness. Now, that noiselessness could be an absence of any movement, or it could imply that the movement is flowing together. So, when the movement is flowing together with that original blueprint, then we get rhythm and we arrive at a state of noiselessness. In the state of alignment, it is what we experience as Swarupavasthanam, when we are connected to our deeper self. And if we look at this, the model that I have done here, and we look at the mind, the densest, the body, the emotions, and the mind all in alignment, then we are in perfect harmony with everything that is there above us. In terms of the gunas that we have, it would correspond to the sattvika guna. When we are more and more quiet, we are more and more non-restless in a sense. As that quietude shifts into restlessness, it adopts a more rajasic form of being. When that leads into noise and darkness, it is what we would experience as tamasic. So the whole purpose of yoga is how do we move back from a noisy condition, which we could equate to being in a diseased shape, to a more coherent a sense of resonance, bringing in a greater sense of resonance within us, which is a more sattvic state of being. So how do we move from dis-ease of sound to harmonies of ease within us? And when we can do that, when we are in a state of yoga at all levels of our being, we experience that alignment, then we experience swasthyam, or good health. And that can also happen when we are connected and tuned with our deeper self. This also gives rise to what I have here as sukha. Sukha, we will look at that later on also, but it means excellent spaces. And it, in the Chandogya Upanishad, is defined as yo vai bhuma tat sukham. That which is expansive, that is sukha. So in this particular diagram that we have, you see that when there is alignment that takes place, then there is resonance that is experienced. And when that resonance is experienced, then there is a spontaneous experience of fullness and joy. All right. This afternoon, we had the tremendous good fortune of listening to Ben, who had found his own way of connecting and finding this alignment within him. And we saw that the natural consequence of that was the experience of joy. So I told you this whole story to show that yoga, as we all know, is a process of moving from a noisy state to a noiseless state, from a disaligned pattern, from disaligned patterns of being to more aligned patterns of existence. And the question is also, of course, then alignment with what? All right. So let's move on and just I'll take you quickly through the history of Sanskrit. The origin of Sanskrit is said to be in the Vedas, and this is a very conservative dating, the 3000 to 6000. Other datings take it back to 10,000, is again conservative, and further down, we go into the Indian concepts of the Yuga and all, and it goes into a time zone that we have not historically been able to establish as such. So why are the Vedas considered the source? Because it is said that in their meditations, the rishis heard the sounds of the mantras. They were mantra drashtaraha and mantra shrotaraha. They were not composing these mantras from their mind level. They were receiving these sounds in the silence of their being and allowing the sounds to resonate freely in their system and expressing that without any distortion of their inner being. So when we talk of the 4 levels of speech, we talk of a level called the para, or the beyond, where things are in their blueprint. It is in the satya. Then I will go back and I'll just show you. So things are in their satya there. Then the individual makes contact. So when you thought of how did we contact with a concept, that connection point is what we call the pashyanti. And that's where the Vijnanamaya level starts functioning, or the higher mind. Okay, that's the intuition that connects with an idea. But very often we see that that idea, as it gets translated through our system, is corrupted by various things. It's corrupted by our preferences, it's corrupted by our aversions, it's corrupted by so many things. And that is the region of our conditionings, this whole noisy space through which this idea is traveling. And then there is Vaikhari. So that was Madhyama, and then Vaikhari, or the expression. Now, in that expression also, we have our own conditioning. We have the conditionings of our regional language influences. We have our conditionings through uh, character preferences, and then also in terms of our cultural circumstances that require us to maybe say, express ourselves in language in certain desired manners, desirable manners. And at the same time, we see that when we are expressing ourselves with language, if one doesn't have the technical know-how of the grammar of the language, the expression will not be as perfect as the idea that we have seen. And so it's been very interesting sometimes to see people who, when you ask them to, if they're not very fluent in English and you ask them to share an idea, they'll be struggling and they'll come through as somebody who is probably not a very intelligent person. But the moment you ask them to speak in their mother tongue, where there is a certain proficiency of the language, their expression of it will make them seem like extremely erudite people, extremely knowledgeable people at times. So language does many things to us, including the fact that if I cannot articulate myself well, it lowers my self-esteem and my self-confidence. If I'm able to express myself clearly, it increases my self-confidence and self-esteem thereby. All right. So I'd like to uh, go back to the slide of the history, and we see that the source of the Vedas, the source of Sanskrit is in the Vedas. So there was a certain quality about the relationship between the seen sound and the express sound. There was no interference. And that is what we call the mantra. The mantra is nothing but systematized sound technology, because what is seen is what is expressed. And because it is going through the multiple layers of alignments of our thought, our emotions, and our expression, that alignment is what makes that word laser-like and creates a very definite result in the world. But what happened is that in order to have that kind of a mind, one also had to have a certain sadhana, a certain practice of quietude, a certain practice of satya in the being, to find of truth, to find that alignment within. So as ages went by, as the age changed from Satya Yuga to Treta to Dwapar and now to Kali, the ability to receive that original sound was distorted. And we moved into the later classical period, where the sound is now not in its pure form. We are not able to access sound and thoughts in their original form. And so, very interestingly, in language, what happens is that it is said in Patanjali's Mahabhashya, there is a story where Prajapati, who's also known as Brahma, the creator of the word, is speaking of things to Indra, and the thing is appearing because in that original time, in that original source of existence, every sound corresponds to a definite result. This is very important to understand, that sounds correspond to definite results. So when we are producing a particular sound, it also corresponds to a particular experience, over and above the fact that we tend to give meaning. So later language, most of our modern languages attribute meaning to sounds. We don't give the meaning that corresponds to the original experience of that sound. All right. So just to give you an example, when I tell you the word peace, you would think of peace of cake or peace of mind. So the sound of peace is identical, but the meanings are diverse because of the mentalized concepts that we are attributing to the different spellings of those words. So we also see in terms of the letters that there is no inherent relationship between the sound of the letter and the writing of it, because sometimes it's pronounced in one way in some languages, and in the same language the sound is pronounced differently at different times. All right. So as we move from a Vedic age to a classical age, there is a change that is happening in terms of how sounds are no longer representing direct experience, but they start corresponding to mentalized conceptual expressions. So what is Sanskrit, and what role can Sanskrit play, and why am I calling it a yoga? So we see that Sanskrit comes from samyak kritam, well done. Can you think of any other language? Think of any other language and try and see the origin of the name for that language. We'll find that it is connected to their geographical location. Mostly it corresponds to the geographical location or to the community that is using that language. But In this case, the name attributed to this language is Sanskritam itself. It is so perfectly done in every aspect of its manifestation that one could not call it anything but that. And then we see that it is also known as Deva Bhasha, or the language of the gods. And why is it known as the language of the gods? Because it has certain properties that correspond to the sounds that are creative of experiences in themselves. And it is also regarded as one of the most wonderful languages. Now, just for the convenience of our presentation, I'm going to keep it in this format. And so what is a language really? So we have language is coming from the root lingua, or the tongue. So the tongue plays a very important role in formatting language, or it comes from the Sanskrit word bhasha. Bhasha means it comes from the root bha, to shine. So a language is that which shines forth. It allows our thoughts to shine forth through language. And the building blocks of language are sounds, words, sentences, and of course the content. So coming to the sounds of the Sanskrit language, every language is comprised of an alphabet, and that alphabet is comprised of a combination of different sounds. So alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, and that's how it gets its name. All right. In Sanskrit, it is known as the Varnamala, or the garland of colors. And when we think of different alphabets, I had done this experiment once with some foreign students who had come over to our institute. And I told them, I said, try to tell me the alphabet of your languages. And so when they were saying, we realized that there is no coherent relationship in the order of the sounds that were placed in the alphabet. There seemed to be a certain randomness. Now, what happens in Sanskrit? So in Sanskrit, there is a very systematic order in which that sound has been placed, and I'm going to show that to you. But I'll show it to you. I'll move on to the next slide and I'll come back here. So in this slide, you see that the whole vocal system has been divided very systematically into 5 places. We have the gutturals, we have the palatals, we have the dentals, the cerebrals, the dentals, and the labials. So there are 5 places of pronunciation that we have. So when you do the vowels, so all the vowels are a, e, u, r, a, I, o, au, aha. So I'd like you maybe to request you to join along with me, and maybe we can, because I said it's going to be an experiential session, so I'd love that you joined along with me. And I'd like you to show this on your hand, all right? So we'll assign a certain vowel to a particular finger that we have here. So just before I launch into it, I want to tell you there are 16 vowels in the Sanskrit alphabet. So the first one is a, and it is followed by the lengthened sound a. So a, e, u, r. So that's a retroflex. Your tongue has to go up to the center of the palate. So r, and then we have r behind the teeth. And then you have a to e. So when you try and go from a to e, what happens? I. So the sound in the middle is the a. So I show it like the French accent, a. And then a slow motion, I. And then you have a and u here. What happens when you go from a to u? So ow. So it gets, o is the middle sound. And then you combine it, ow, and then anuswara. It's a nasalized sound, and it's an aspirate, and I do this because it is represented by 2 dots. All right. So would you like to repeat that once? Just repeat it after me. I know many of you are already familiar with it, but what I propose you do is close your eyes and just say the sounds. And these vowels also take into consideration the fact that the duration of the sound matters, the place of pronunciation matters, the duration matters, and the breath involved in it matters. So you have so 2 beats, all right? And then every vowel, the first simple 5 vowels are said to have 18 combinations. So the r and r don't have 18, but the a, u, and e have 18 variations, which means you have the single length, the double length, the triple length, nasalized, non-nasalized, the 3 tones. So you can do a swarita, udatta, and anudatta. So there are 3 tones that you use for chanting this sound. And it's very interesting because by including these aspects within the language, within the formation of the alphabet, there is a recognition that these variations are doing something to us. So already we start becoming conscious of the physiological benefits sound has an effect on the body itself. When you're including the breath, we start recognizing that sound has an effect on our emotional being as well. When we start recognizing that these sounds also correspond to a certain image, then and a certain experience, then sound in certain ways starts corresponding to the mind and the visuals that correspond to the mentalized understanding of those sounds. All right, so I'll just say it once and I request you to repeat after me. So close your eyes, allow yourselves to relax, because Sanskrit is really about an experience. I cannot repeat that often enough. And the more you allow the sounds of this language to sink in your being, these sounds will have very definite healing effects on the subtle vibratory nature of ourselves. So repeat this, just the vowels, and I'll tell you, explain a little more about them. So close your eyes and repeat after me. A, a, I, u, u, r, r, l, l, a, I, O, ow, ah. When do we do the sound ah in life? We tend to do the sound ah in life when we want to de-stress ourselves. So I joke and I tell my friends, I say Sanskrit is a very naturally de-stressing language because it has a lot of this aspirated visarga in it, besides incorporating breath in the pronunciation of its consonants. And let's move on to the consonants. And here I'd like you to see the diagram that I have, because we have the different letters that correspond to the different parts of our vocal system. So you have k, k, g, g, ng, the first 5 consonants. We have 33 of these consonants. It's simple consonants. So you have k, k, g, g, ng in the throat, ch, ch, j, j, ny in the palate, t, th, d, d, n in the cerebral, t, th, d, th, n in the dental, p, p, b, b, m in the labial. So if you've noticed, the order in which we have said the first 25 letters or the 25 consonants are the order in which sound comes out of the human vocal system. And as it comes out of the human vocal system, we see that there is something that is happening also at the level of our brain. All right. But before I move on to that, I'd like to show that there is an order, even there's a systematization within the sets of 5 letters that we have been pronouncing. So you have k, which is a guttural sound. It's a touch sound, with a vowel Then you have a breath, k. Then you have the sound touch, g, breath, g, and a nasal, ng. So if you do k, k, g, g, ng, there is a play with your breath and a touch, a stimulation, physiological stimulation. And finally, there's a nasal, ng. And you move up, ch, ch, j, j, nya. It's a nasal, but it's a different location of a nasal. T, th, d, d, n. Again, it has changed. T, th, d, th, n. Dental, p, p, b, b, m, labial. And then we have the semi-vowels, which are y, which is from e and 2 to 1. R is 3 to 1. 4, l is 4 to 1. And 5 is y, v, or v. All right. And then we have 3 sibilants, which are sh, sh, s. So sh, the palatal, sh, the cerebral, and sh, sh, s is a dental. And you have h, which is urastha, which comes down to your heart, throat, heart center. All right. So what we see basically that when we are doing the alphabet, we are doing a very systematic stimulation of the brain. How? Because we're very systematically stimulating all the parts of the vocal system and incorporating breath. That in turn does a very systematic stimulation of the different parts in the brain, which then, as I joke and say, also can lead to good hair growth also. All right, that's a joke apart. All right, but coming back to just this part of it, we see that physiologically, the pronunciation of the Sanskrit letters helps us to have a good brain massage. because of the breathing, it allows us a good pranayama. And at a subtler level, these letters also correspond to the different chakras of the body. So all the 16 vowels are said to correspond to the kantha, to the Vishuddha chakra, and then all the next 12. So 16 in the throat, 12 in the Anahata chakra, and then the next ones, the next 10 are in the Manipura, the next 6 are in the Swadhisthana, and the next 4 are in the Muladhara. You see that each of the petals of the chakras are assigned these different letters. And then you do the last 2, which go hum and ksham, come up to the ajna. And what we notice here is that as you do the recitation of the Sanskrit alphabet, you're literally screwing down your chakras using the different sounds. So it is not ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. So all the 16 are in the throat, so that's fine. And they're known as the matrikas. They are the ones that give shape and form to the sound that is produced. All right. And then we have the different letters around the Anahata chakra. So we see that the 12 are not, it's not 10. It's not ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. That's one set. Cha, cha, ja, ja, nya, another set. No, it goes ta, tha. So it's as if you start and then you go to the next one. Ta, tha, da, da, na, ta, tha, da, na, pa, pa. And then ba, bha, ma. So you see that you're literally screwing down your energy circuit. And then when you do hum and ksham, it goes up all the way up to your ajna. So you've gone down your energy circuit and boom, almost like raising your kundalini just with saying the alphabet. I must tell you that there are certain practices, established practices, where they say that reciting the Sanskrit alphabet ensures that you keep good health. But when you're doing it in this mantra form, then we add the sound with it. Why do we add the sound Because the sound corresponds intrinsically to an establishment. So come, kham, gum, gham. So I'd like you to repeat after me once. So we'll do the vowels and then followed by the consonants. And what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes and allow yourself to let these sounds resonate in your being, basically. All right. So close your eyes and just repeat after me this mantra purusha of 50 letters done in the mantra format. So, am, im, rm, rm, lm, lm, aim, I'm, om, aum, ah, come, kham, gum, gham, ngam, chum, chum, jum, jhum, nyam, tum, tum, dum, dhum, num, tum, thum, dum, dhum, num, pum, phum, bum, bhum, mum, yum, rum, lum, vum, shum, shum, sum, hum, ksham. You would have noticed that as you go down this thing, I mean, I tried doing this once with, I do it very often with my group of friends that we do our yoga workshops, yoga psychology workshops, and mantra workshop across the world with Dr. Vinayachandra. And what we find is that if you are doing the Sanskrit alphabet, you're forced to also keep your concentration. And if your mind gets deviated at any point, even if you have been doing Sanskrit for a long time, there's a good chance that you might miss the order. So the recitation of the Sanskrit alphabet also engenders subconsciously a lot of concentration within us. All right. And we see that, like I said, it has several benefits physiologically. And when you say that, when we speak Sanskrit, the spoken Sanskrit is not just an utterance of a communication of our thoughts. We see that because these letters correspond to our different chakras, the spoken the aspect of it, the pronunciation of these letters also is like an energy work within us, where these sounds are like touching different parts, different chakras. So I say that chanting, speaking Sanskrit is like it's like energy circuiting basically. All right, so we have that, and the benefit of that is that we start, if you speak Sanskrit, it's very interesting. I've had different people across the globe again with whom I've had the good fortune of teaching Sanskrit. But when I asked them to share their experience, many of them, a friend in Malta especially once told me that when I speak different languages, it corresponds to different effects. But when I speak Sanskrit, it feels as if my entire being is participating in this language. And if you come down to it very logically also, we see how the pronunciation of this letter does have a special impact on us. Why? Because if I spoke only English, or if I spoke only French, or any of these languages in my life, if you notice the sound, the T sound, so we see that the T is not a dental. I'll go back to the picture here of the image. We see that the T is a sound in between the cerebral and the dental. So when you are touching that part of your mouth, we don't ever, if you only speak English in your life, you don't ever stimulate the cerebral in the body. And neither do you do a pure dental. Similarly, if you speak only French or Spanish or any of these Romanesque languages, you never stimulate the region, physiologically, the region between the palatals and the dentals. And why is that cerebral point very important physiologically? Because that's where you have two very important energy meridians, according to Qigong, that intersect. So every time you are touching that part, you're also stimulating these energy centers in the body. Now you just think of it, that just speaking a language can have so many multiple physiological and energy benefits, energetic benefits in our system. I'll move on, because Sanskrit, there is at every level of Sanskrit, there is this kind of a special quality to it. One last point before I move on is the fact that because there is a precision in the pronunciation of the sound, whether I say kala in terms of the length of the vowel, or I say kala, they mean two different things completely. So the mind is forced to pay attention to every single utterance in the Sanskrit language. And when the consciousness of the individual is required to fine tune itself with every single sound that it is producing, it is at that point that it spontaneously starts generating a kind of a Sanskritization of our being. More so, these sounds also correspond astrologically to different planets. So, since everything can be summarized in terms of vibrations, every letter is said to correspond to a certain planet. And when we are making these sounds, we are creating a sort of resonance at multiple levels, not just of ourselves, but of the world together. So we see that when we're talking of Indian culture, of Indic thought, we see that there is an understanding of this interrelationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. And whatever we are doing at a microcosmic level is having its impact on the macrocosm. And everything that transpires on the macrocosm is having its impact on the microcosm. As a language, Sanskrit has captured that multi-layered resonance of vibrations across the different levels or the different worlds of existence. All right, and that then helps us in different ways get connected to the cosmos. Subconsciously, we get connected to the cosmos around us. So I think I've said a lot about the alphabet in itself, but I think the more you delve on it, the more you discover its wonderful features. But I'll move on, because I'd like us to cover a lot more in this, and then we come to the formation of words. We see that in most languages, words are nominative of things. They just say, it's just a name that is given to something. We don't necessarily go into the root and try and understand the etymology of the word and understand the psychology that that word represents. In Sanskrit, words are often descriptive of things. So when we say suprabhatam in the morning, It means you can decompose it into certain fractions, into certain sound components, sound bites, like su, pra, bha, tam. Su means excellent, pra means more, bha means to shine, tam means that which has shone. So when we wake up in the morning, it's true that the sun has shone forth, but more importantly, it is the inner being that has to shine forth. And if you're feeling groggy, I can assure you that you say Suprabhatam, you do the bha, bha, and you will see how it's like the Kapala Bhati, and you will wake up even more. Secondly, we see that the words are descriptive in terms of the actual words that they are talking about. So you have Ambu means water, the means giver. So Ambu, the represents the giver of water. You have various synonyms for Ambu. So Vari is another one. So the cloud, which is Ambuda, can also be called Varida. So we're seeing that there is one truth which has multiple forms. All right. And then you have words like Neta, Neta leader, that which carries us forward. And also the word for our nation, which is Bharatam, which means immersed in light. So Bharatam, Bha as Bhasha and Prabhatam. Bha means light and Rata means immersed. So the name of this land was not just a name given to it by chance. The name of this land was given to it for what it has contributed to the world, the light that it has created in so many ways. And one of the biggest lights that it has offered to the world is the yogic tradition, the language, the yogic tradition, so many things. Moving on, we also have, in terms of the word formations, the fact that one word can mean many things and many words can mean one thing. So therefore, you can have 1,000 names for the sun. You have the word Anshumali. It means that one which is comprised of various rays, Anshu meaning ray, Divakara, the creator of the day, etc. I mean, it's a long list, but you think of it in any other language and you have the word sun. That's it. We don't have many other combinations, for many other possibilities of expressing that object, because that object has just got a name that is given to it, and that's about it. But for example, different cultures have different weightages given to certain realities. So I know, for example, that in the Eskimo world, they have 40 different words for ice, because the different kinds of ice correspond to their livelihood. Their survival depends on their understanding of what kind of ice they're dealing with. So language plays an incredibly important role in determining our worldview, in determining who we are and how we are impacted by the world around us. All right. Another word where one word has many meanings is the word khaga. Just a sample. So kha means space and ga means goal. So khaga means that which moves in space. It can be a bird, it can be a cloud, it can be a person who's flying in the sky. But then we have words that tend to have more popular meaning. So khaga would popularly tend to mean a bird. It is also the creator of realities, like we saw, that every sound that you create corresponds to an experience. So the word Shanti is not a meaning of peace that is attributed to the word Shanti, but the vibrations of the word Shanti create the experience of peace. Similarly, we have the word Om, which is said to be the creator of all sounds. And it can take a few sessions in itself, but very quickly I will tell you, when we were doing the alphabet, we saw that A is the first sound the human vocal instrument can produce. U is the last it can formulate. And then you have the entire range from A to U, which represents all the sounds that the human vocal instrument can create. What's so special about it? This is the only region that can represent all the sounds of creation, right? For a human being. Now what happens there? That when we do the Om, so you go O. So O is the sound in the middle. Now, if I wanted to create, if you take this as a range, if I take a thread and I want to create the maximum resonance in this particular range, I want to create the maximum vibration. That's what I wanted to say, the maximum vibration. One will pluck it in the center. So when one does the Om, one is actually helping the entire range of sounds to vibrate. If I did an then I'm plucking it more towards the ah. If I do an ooh, too much of an ooh, I'm doing it more there. If I want to get the maximum amplification, I have to do the O right in the center. The benefits of that, the Om, when you do it, acts like a reset button. Because when you do a sound vibration, the rest of our vibratory patterns start resonating with that. And that's one of the ways of understanding physiologically why the Om would be the master sound of creation itself, right? And then you have different kinds of Aim and all that have different implications. And we also see why you have the bija mantras, which don't make conceptual cognitive sense, but they correspond to experience itself. All right. Moving on, we have words like Sanskrit non-translatables, where these words like dharma, mantra, yajna, brahma, they correspond to certain worldviews that cannot be easily replicated when you're trying to do a translation from one language to another. I'd just like to take up the word Brahma. So Brahma comes from the root brah, which means to expand. Because in the yoga world, the word Brahma is also very important. So brah, you say that and you feel the expansion. This is one of the words that allows different pronunciation. So very quickly. So the word Brahma it represents this expansion. All right. And what does it represent? It represents not a being. Brahma is a being, but Brahman and Brahma represents a state of absolute expansion. And that is a quality. It is not like I said, it is not a static thing. It is a quality of being. One can experience absolute expansion in the smallest of things, and one can experience a lot of rigidity in the largest of things. So it has nothing to do with the size. It is a quality that Brahma is talking about. And when we are through alignments trying to reconnect to our original self, we feel more and more that we need to inculcate or this kind of an openness within us. So in the Vedas, they very beautifully summarize the entire objective of yoga, of our existence, as saying that there are two kinds of cards that we play in life. Either we are playing the card of light and darkness, or we are playing the card of expansion and contraction. So Brahma is the card of expansion that we have to play. And in terms of sound also, it helps us connect to that. So different words in different languages don't always find an exact corresponding translation in other languages. Okay, so we move on and then we talk of some practical psychology. There are words like sukha. Sukha comes from the root, comes from the combination of su and kha. Su means excellent and kha means space. So when we're talking of sukha, the question is, what does this excellent space mean, and where should one have excellent space? So by going into the etymology of the word, you see that our life is a conglomeration of different kinds of spaces. There are inner spaces and there are outer spaces. If we think that the outer space has to be excellent for us to experience happiness, then we have outsourced our happiness to the world and we are victims of their circumstance. But if we recognize that this excellence is a quality of our inner space, then we have to automatically also recognize that it is required of us to take ownership of our own happiness. Happiness becomes our exclusive responsibility when we understand that this word is describing primarily the quality of an inner space. But it does not exclude the external space because of the yogic recognition that no space is completely compartmentalized from the other. Who we are impacts what we create around us. And therefore, if we want to create happiness around us, it requires us to start creating happiness or excellence within us. What space is an excellent space? Is a jumbled up, noisy space an excellent space? Or can we start creating more aligned spaces? Alignment in our thinking, alignment in our emotions, alignment in our speech. The more we are able to bring in that alignment, the more powerful our speech becomes. And that's why in the yoga tradition also, they talk of satya as the first yama, because they say that the more one practices satya, the more alignment one experiences. And taking this back to the sounds of this language doesn't allow us subjectivization of that sound. I like in English, if I say rain or I say rain or I say rain, it doesn't matter really, so long as the meaning is communicated. In Sanskrit, one has to make the sound because that is the sound to be produced. It has nothing to do about one's a Puritan idea. There is a requirement inherent in the language that if one is uttering the right sound in terms of our physiological utterance of that sound, it also, in order to utter a sound correctly physiologically, it requires a certain attention in the mind, it requires a certain attention in the spirit, in the intention to want to articulate it correctly. This articulation of precise sounds also helps to fine tune the hearing. So, one of the benefits that comes out of speaking Sanskrit can also be, I'm not saying that it is always the case, but when one connects to the spirit of this language, then it starts refining the nature in incredible ways. And as Vinay had mentioned, this language has the power of fine tuning our consciousness to truth, because it doesn't allow us preferences. It doesn't allow us this luxury of raga and dvesha. I want to pronounce it like that. I want to say it like that. I'm sorry. It is to be said like that, and that is how you have to pronounce it. And therefore, this ability to say it for what it is very subconsciously cleans our chitta of our waverings of conditionings that we acquire over a lifetime. It's the more I think of it, the more I'm like, wowed by certain subtle benefits that this language brings to our nature. And just going back to the term sukha, going to the etymology of the word opens up an entire philosophy of what happiness really is. In fact, the word happy also is very beautiful because it comes from the root hap, which means to feel grateful. If one feels grateful in life, one can never be an unhappy person. All right. But coming back to Sanskrit, we have the other word apatti. The word apatti in our regional languages means problem, danger, all of that in the Indian regional languages. But Shankaracharya uses the term apatti in the sense of realization. And what does that mean? And how does it come about? If you go to the root of the word, a means towards you, pat means to fall, tihi implies it has fallen. So apatti means that which has fallen upon you. Now, when we talk of realization as apathy, we understand why it could mean that. Because when we have a realization, it is like, okay, I've understood. It's as if something has fallen into our consciousness and we see light, right? But then, how did it come to mean? How did it come to mean objection? How did it come to mean danger in regional languages? This, for me, when I understood it, it sort of gave me the whole art of communication. All right, how do I make that connection? If I am a egoistic speaker and I'm saying this is what is Sanskrit is great, but the moment somebody says I don't fully understand how, if I'm an egoistic speaker, I'll say, how the hell you challenge what I'm saying? So I will consider somebody else's realization as a threat to what I have presented. But if one recognizes that the whole purpose of communication is to effectively convey what is in my head into your head with minimum distortion, then I have become an effective communicator. In which case, when I have said that Sanskrit is the greatest language, I'm just making that for a sentence, because just for a sentence, I don't. It's not about trying to say superiority or. I mean, this is a real disclaimer here. But if I'm making that statement that Sanskrit is the greatest language, and you are telling me, but I don't quite understand how, and I don't agree with you. If I am genuinely trying to communicate my understanding of this language and why I believe in it, I will listen to your objection and I will try and make you understand. I will explain to you why I'm saying that Sanskrit is such a great language. And the more people have apathy, the better I am as a communicator, because I am then forced to address the gaps in my communication. So just the root, I mean, just going to the etymology of the word really reveals the whole science of communication. That if you want to be a good communicator, one has to be a good listener. And then, of course, one has to have the skills to be able to present the ideas effectively. But for that, one has to listen to what people are saying and then find creative ways in communicating what needs to be communicated. That's with apathy, vairagya, very important word, abhyasa and vairagya. So what is vairagya there? So vairagya comes from the root ranj, to color. So when we are attached to something, we allow that thing to completely color our consciousness. If we love somebody and the person has faults, we don't see those faults because our vision is colored with that preference of ours. If we don't like somebody, again, it's colored negatively, right? Even when we think of somebody, it's not just a color. When we even think of the sound of something, immediately that word creates a certain image in our being and influences our decisions, right? So when we talk of vairagya, we are talking of not allowing ourselves to be colored by anything. So how do you go through life, do a thing, and not allow that to leave any coloring on ourselves? This can again happen only when we have a certain degree of rita, the right. We are not following in the yogic terminologies the prayers of what we like, but following what we need to do when we do. That is the concept of shreyas, doing the right thing at the right moment. And we come back again to the Sanskrit pronunciation, the Sanskrit writing, where every letter corresponds to one sound. The benefits of that is that when we are able to implement this rita in our lives, then we are not so easily swayed by events in our lives. Now, coming back to a disclaimer again, that I'm sure many of you have encountered Sanskritists who are full of flaws, including me. I mean, we are all human and we all have our own limitations. But if one connects to the spirit of this language and allows the spirit of this language to format our being, the benefits of that are very subtle, very sure, and remarkable in many, many ways. And again, I would say it's an invitation to explore. Don't take my words to it. Take on the study of Sanskrit and you will see these differences happening in your being. All right, but study it with the spirit of the language. If you do it mechanically, it will not happen. And that is a guarantee from my side as well. All right, moving on. Go on to the sentence and just keep track of time. Yeah, so we have looked at sounds, we have looked at word formations. Now let's go into the grammar. How do we form sentences? So I'll take this particular sentence here, which is a simple sentence, the boy goes. Every sentence is comprised of every sentence is comprised of a subject and a verb. We know that. Now, when we just have a simple sentence, we are uttering it from the left brain, which is responsible for language creation. We are at the same time creating an image in our right brain. Right? So when I'm saying the boy goes, the image is of a simple boy going. But one doesn't know more than that. If I just told you the word boy, you would have no idea what that boy is doing, right? And when I say goes, you would have a curiosity as to who is going. So there are questions that emerge in the mind if we want to create a more perfect, a more complete picture of what we are trying to describe. So some questions that come up are who's going, who's going, of course, with whom, where, how, why, from where, when. So I'll make the sentence complete. So with whom is the boy going? The boy is going, or how is the boy going? By cycle. Where is the boy going? To school. Why? To study. From where? From his home. When? In the morning. Let's make the sentence complete. The boy goes to school from home by cycle in the morning at 8 with a friend. All right. Now, what has happened in this process is that as we have articulated our thought, we have also added details to the image in the right brain. Now let's go forward and see what this does. So in the English language, if I just told you now school and you did not know the rest of the sentence, you would be clueless as to what that school is doing in my image. Am I going to school? Am I coming from school? Am I doing something in the school? Right? In order to make that sense more complete, I have to add the prepositions. And therefore, when I speak English, I'm bound to keep prepositions along with the nouns in order to make that particular noun coherent, to make it meaningful. So we have this sentence here, the boy goes to school from home by cycle with friend to study in the morning at 8. If in this case I shifted anything, so I said boy, home, school, to, the, it would become nonsensical. What Sanskrit does brilliantly is that it collapses the prepositions into the noun itself, and that is known as the vibhakti. So I normally, when I teach Sanskrit to my students, I say that we will Sanskritize English. How do we do that? We keep the English vocabulary, but you add the Sanskrit grammar to it. So boy, yaha, the aha will tell you that it's a boy, that it's the subject. Goes ti, the ti is a code, and that code will tell you that it is the first, it is the third person singular present tense, um, and it's a present tense that is doing the action. All right. So just boy goes the schoolam. Moment I say it means to the school. It's the destination because I've said goes. Homat, at would mean from home. Cyclaya, with the cycle. Friendena, with the friend. Studyaya, to study. Morninge, in the morning at 8 at 8. All right. So what we see is that we have 18 words that are there in the English language. And when we condense or we collapse the preposition into the word itself, that form is, it's known as the vibhakti form, we get 9 words. So boy, you can count it and you will see that it ends up in being just 9 words. And so the direct impact of that or the direct benefit of that is that there is brevity in expression and there is a free word order. So I'll tell you the Sanskrit sentence: Balakaha gachati vidyalayam grihat dvichakrikaya mitrena pathanaya pratah kale ashtavadane. Now what happens is, because every word contains the full meaning, every word now is complete in the way it is relating to all the other words. And therefore, I can adopt a very free order of the sentence. So I can say, for example, I'll do the English sentence so that it's easy for you to understand what I imply. So I can say, bo yaha ho mat morning e cycleaya goes the friendena studyaya ete. It will not change the meaning. Or I can start with studyaya, bo yaha cycleaya, etc. So you see that there is suddenly a flexibility that comes about. And how does this flexibility and brevity start impacting our thinking? Because now just imagine that if you had to speak a language where you are forced to stick to a certain order in order to make yourself understood, versus a different order where now you're allowed a certain flexibility. It doesn't matter how you're saying it, so long as you're saying it correctly and so long as you are saying it completely, right? As long as you're doing that, the meaning is conveyed. So there is a certain freedom and creativity that is allowed to emerge for the speaker of that language. So what are some of the implications, psycholinguistic implications? One, there is the embedded interrelationality of the world around us becomes apparent. What do I mean by that? The world that we see is a bit like a puzzle, where there is a different relationship of things. But if we are not clear about how those things are related, then it can lead to confusions in how we are expressing ourselves. In Sanskrit, like I told you, in English, if I told you the word home, you would have to add the prepositions to make sense. In Sanskrit, because homat or grihat is telling you from the house, each word gets connected to the other in a very systematic and disciplined manner. So this generates a certain clarity and relation of the relationality or the interrelationship of thought components, which means that if you're looking at the world through a Sanskrit lens and you need to express your world through a Sanskrit lens, you would be forced to have clarity about how different things are interrelated with each other spontaneously. There is no time lag there. If you're speaking in Sanskrit, you have to instantaneously make a connection between, whether it is to add to the complication, you have to be clear whether it is a singular or it is a dual or it is a plural. And then which is the case? Is it a subject case? Is it a noun? Is it an object case? Is it an instrument case? Is it a dative case? Is it ablative case from? Is it a genitive case of? Or is it a locative case? Or is it just something that you are just recognizing, like a vocative, a sambandha? So these are the different cases that are there, and they reflect the entire relationship. It is, I would say, the smallest categorization in which these words can relate to each other. Talking of these categories, I also remembered that when we were talking of the Sanskrit alphabet, we also had another way of of ordering the letters known as the Maheshwara Sutrani, based on which Panini wrote his Ashtadhyayi. So instead of saying ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, or cha, cha, ja, ja, na, etc., he started, or with the vowels are a, e, etc., he changed the order. He said a, e, un, ril, rik, a, ong, ayouch, etc. And what he did as a consequence of that is that he allowed the rearrangement of letters so that he could make aphorisms in order to express the entire grammatic formulation. Okay, so just in 4,000 sutras, the entire Sanskrit grammar has been represented, and which has remained pretty much unchanged since the time that he formulated it. Now, what is the consequence of that again? Is the fact that in mathematics, we have Peterson, who did a mathematical calculation of the possibilities that those sutras, there are 14 sutras of Maheshwara Sutrani. Those 14 sutras, there are if you rearrange the order, permutations and combinations, minimum permutations and combinations would be required in order to come up with the Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So there's a lot of mental brilliance that is associated with the expression of this language. That expression is at the level of its letters, at the expression of its words, at the expression of its sentence formations. Moving on, it helps unambiguous categorizing of the world without and within, as we saw. And finally, it represents a philosophical logic of its linguistic grid that facilitates the mental computing needed to form sentences. This mental computing, because when I teach Sanskrit, I also notice that for people, if one is absent in one's consciousness, one cannot handle Sanskrit. One cannot deal with Sanskrit if there is a mental apathy of one's consciousness. Sanskrit requires 100% attention all the time. This moment to moment decision making that the brain has to do with every sound that it is using, with every word that it is formatting, the interrelationship of words that it is doing, is something that I think has a very direct effect on the very gray matter of our brain. In fact, we have James Hartzell, a neuroscientist, who did an experiment with Pandits who had been chanting the Vedas for long years. And he found that the extent of gray matter that they had was substantially more than those who had not engaged in any kind of practice of chanting the Vedas. But I will put a disclaimer there. He also says that we cannot be sure that the effect is not because of the effort of memorization. He could not directly attribute it to Sanskrit as per se. But from my investigation of what Sanskrit does to us, it seems this requirement of constant attention is what also can create more precise neural pathways in our head. I'm making a lot of claims, and I know that a lot of this would require experimentation to be verified. But a heuristic understanding of the benefits of Sanskrit opens up these possible areas for research, is what I would say. I'll just move on and say this, share this quote from Dr. David Frawley. He says that Sanskrit is the oldest and most continually used language in the world. By the most conservative accounts, it has been used continuously since 1500s BC. By more liberal accounts, it was in use before 6000 BC. Classical Sanskrit follows the same basic pattern since the time of Panini, who probably lived around the time of the Buddha. It has the largest literature of any language, along with the sacred literature of two of the world's greatest religions, Hinduism and Buddhism. It possesses a larger group of works on spirituality, metaphysics, and mythology than any other language. It has an extensive literature of poetry, drama, and philosophy, though much of it has been lost in time. I'd also like to share with you, because we've looked at the benefits of the language as per se on us, I'd like to just take you through quickly on the contents of this language. What is the rich literature that it exposes us to? But first, I'll talk about the brilliance that the that its linguistic nature allows us. So we have this magic square, as you can see, and it is a composition of a verse which is Deva Kanini Kava De Vahika Swasvakahiva Kaka Re Bhavare Kaka Niswabhavya Vyabhaswini. You make a mirror image of that, and what do we find? We find that no matter which direction you read it in, it will always be identical. So you start recognizing that this language is not just, again, communication of ideas, but it is also doing mathematics. And at the same time, it is incorporating poetry into it. And we find a lot of scientific literature of very advanced mathematical formulae that is represented in terms of poetry. So on one level, that same verse will be a poetic expression, and on the other level, it will be a mathematical solution. Some of them, for example, is also this one. I will not read it out, but what it is solving for us is the way in which the horse touches all the different squares of a chessboard. So the first verse is the line on top. The first quarter is Sthiragasam Sadaradhya, and then the second quarter is what we have below it. You have several verses in this manner. The answer of it is when you rearrange the order of the letters. So the rearrangement would be Sthita Sama, sorry. So it goes Sthita Samayara Japta. I am not so sure. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact verse. I should have got that for you. But you can look this up and you will find it. But basically, this particular square is telling us that if you have a verse, you rearrange the letters, and the order of those separated letters will give you the solution to the very famous problem of the horse. This is how it is represented in certain texts. So this is also known as Chitra Kavya, where the arrangement of the arrangement of the letters and the rearrangement of their order will give you different images that are formed. Now I'll move on to the content part of it, which is dealing with higher thoughts. We are not just in terms of creativity, but we are actually addressing fundamental questions of existence. And Sanskrit literature abounds, it abounds in documentation of the exploration of the spirit that has been undertaken in Sanskrit, of the human quest. Important questions: who am I? What is the purpose of my life? What is my relationship in the world I live in? From a yogic worldview, what is the role of Sanskrit? Very simply, but very profoundly, in Sanskrit, we do not have the verb to have. The only verb that exists is to be. So you cannot say, I have a book in English. When you say, I have a book versus the book is with me, there is a fundamental shift that takes place in our subconscious way of relating to that book. When you take that question further into understanding ourself, who am I? You answer that question and you say, am I my body or do I have a body? You realize that we all have a body. We are not our body. That opens up a lot of questions. Questions about choice of who we want to become. I do become my body. Of course, if I'm hungry, I don't feed somebody else. To what extent do I identify with the body? Do I have emotions or am I my emotions? Again, it opens up a whole lot of possibilities of understanding that if I am not my emotions and I have emotions, I can choose which emotion I want to have no matter what the world wants me to have. If the world wants me to be angry, but I am not anger, I can choose not to have anger in me. Huge possibilities. Next, am I my mind or do I have a mind? Oh, I'm sorry, am I my thoughts or do I have thoughts? In that, we see that the moment I say I have thoughts, I can suddenly choose which thoughts I want to have and which thoughts I don't want to have. Similarly, I recognize that if I'm speaking to somebody and I don't like that person's thoughts, that person is not their thoughts. I can disagree with the person's thought. I need not dislike the person. The freedom that it brings in, and this freedom for me was like an absolute aha moment when I discovered that Sanskrit is a language which does not have the verb to have. It's a language that has been in existence for over 6000 BC, as David Foley told us. And imagine that has not been the need to conceive of the verb to have. So what does that do? For what kind of consciousness does that language emerge? Where everything is, and you can only be in possession of something for some time, but you cannot have something and deprive it of its existential value. We are trustees of the world we live in. And the other thing that comes out of that have and being that is very important is there was a civilizational emphasis on not on how much you have, but who you are. The investment on being was primary over the investment of having. Because what you have can be lost. Who you are will always carry through, not just in one lifetime, but in all lifetimes. All right. So again, going back linguistically, so the Sanskrit language allows us to go in. Another thing it does is it helps us to let go our egoistic natures in some ways. Because if I say gachami, which means I go, I need not say aham gachami. Just the verb gachami is enough to indicate that I am going. All right. And at the same time, it also helps us to recognize the person in front of us is intelligent. We don't have to spell out everything. If you just say gachami, the person obviously understands that I am going and not somebody else. So many things. I mean, it's just 1 hour. I've taken already an hour and a half and I need to wind up. But the treasures that this language has and the impacts that it has on us is something that no matter how much I say is always an understatement. Okay, I'll just go on to the other aspect of this language because the Indic worldview is a recognition of the multi-layered nature of reality. The words like Agni that are used in Vedas to invoke the fire, Sri Aurobindo says we need to understand the source of that word when you go to the root, which is Agre Nayati iti Agni. That substance is known as Agni because it is always burning upwards. No matter which direction you put that substance, it will always burn upwards. So what in us psychologically corresponds to that? It represents the will in us, that original will that allows us to live our lives and become who we become. Without willpower, one can achieve nothing. And you see why in the English language we say the person has a fire to do something. All right. So that willpower is what pushes us to achieve things. And we also have the word Shanti that we looked at. So recognizing this multi-layered reality is another subconscious, I won't say faculty, but a possibility that this language awakens us to. But there are probably a few things that I'm claiming about the Sanskrit language, which also work for other languages, like the word fire. It would work, but why does Sanskrit add a special? Why do I add a special note for Sanskrit here? Because you can take it down to the root of the word formation itself. Agre nayati iti agni. Okay, this is not so easily understood when probably one would say fire, which again has only that limitation. Agni is also known as Purohita, one whom you place in front of you. It is Vahni, it is the carrier of our oblations to the gods, etc., etc. Finally, it carries ideas that represent principles like Ekoham Bahusyam, I am one and I have multiple forms. And this is there reflected in every aspect of this language. So I'd like to conclude now, almost. So we see the physiological benefits of Sanskrit. Where does it correspond to our wellness? It stimulates all the parts of our being very systematically. Emotionally, because there is also an inherent connection with our breath. So there is a breath regulation that takes place spontaneously, which in turn can help us regulate our emotions. Mentally, it helps to bring a certain discipline in our thinking. The need to calculate and compute with every single sound, with every single word we make, helps our mind become more mathematical, spontaneously mathematical. And this mathematicality, if I may say, of classical languages is also found in Greek and Latin. It is a tragedy that our education systems have not retained the foundations of classical languages in the learning of our languages, because the learning of classical languages is not about just having access to ancient content, literature, but it was a tool, a subconscious tool to format our mind and make it more disciplined and think more sharply. Spiritually, this language gives us the potential to reconnect to our para levels, because sound itself is a carrier to the original experience. And it does that also by the cultivation of Rita Chit. Like I said, the focus of the Sanskrit on the right, always on the right sound, the right grammatic formation, the right expression, the right feelings also, because of the content that is there, cultivates this Rita Chit, the right consciousness in us. And we have an experiment by Dr. Fred Travis, who was a speaker on one of our sessions, who said that uh, he did this experiment where he made people read texts in modern languages. He made them read texts in Sanskrit and made them do and made them do transcendental meditation. And in every case, he was testing what happens to their physiological parameters. So the skin resistance, the alpha coherence in the brain. These people who were reading out Sanskrit texts or their translations did not understand the content of what they were saying. So it was purely to see the benefit of the sound on their body. And what he says that reading of Sanskrit texts have the same benefit as doing transcendental meditation. So if which means that the skin resistance increased and the alpha coherence in the brain was enhanced. So when friends joke and tell me, I mean, when they ask me very seriously, they said, "Do you meditate?" I said, "No, I speak Sanskrit." So that's one possible great benefit that Sanskrit can have on us. And we already spoke of James Hartzell's experiment called, which has been labeled as a Sanskrit effect, but with a caveat on that. And to close, great quotes here by different scholars. We have Professor Frederick Schlegel, who says, "Justly it is called Sanskrit, that is perfect, finished. Sanskrit combines these various qualities possessed separately by other tongues: Grecian copiousness, deep tone, Roman force, the divine afflatus characterizing the Hebrew tongues. Judged by an organic standard of the principal elements of language, Sanskrit excels in grammatical structure and is indeed the most perfectly developed of all idioms, not excepting Greek and Latin." And then Sri Aurobindo, my guru, he says, "The language itself, as has been universally recognized by those competent to form a judgment, is one of the most magnificent, the most perfect, and wonderfully sufficient literary instruments developed by the human mind, at once majestic and sweet and flexible, strong and clearly formed, and full and vibrant and subtle." And I'd like to end with this mantra: Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May all be happy or have excellent spaces. May all be without disease. May all see the good, and may none have any sorrow. Om peace, peace, peace. I'm sorry for the typo on disease. And I would also like to mention that in terms of transliteration, this is not a perfect transliteration due to a shortcoming on the keyboard. But what I would like to add very importantly is that this mantra that we chant is not just about ensuring well-being around us. This mantra is also a responsibility. Because when one says, "May all be happy, sarve bhavantu sukhinaha," one has to ensure well-being for oneself. One has to ensure that one has happiness as a responsibility. If one wants the world around us to be disease-free, one has to practice good health as a responsibility. If one wants to see the good around us, or if one wants everybody to see the good, it is a responsibility for each individual to act according to the good. Bhadram. It's a very beautiful word. It's a very word of culture, refinement. And Ma Kashchit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Let none have any sorrow. And for that, we have to ensure that we do not give any kind of dukkha or bad space for those around us. Om, peace, peace, peace.
Super presentation, Anu.
I will just one last quotation here, if I may.
You know, one of the things is that one side effect of your Sanskritam is that even your laughter is like a Vedic chant.
I'll take the compliment, but it's very generous. All right. I would just like to come back to this quotation of Will Durant's when he says about the relationship of the importance of Sanskrit for India. He says that India was the motherland of our race and Sanskrit, the mother of Europe's languages. She was the mother of our philosophy, mother through the Arabs of much of our mathematics, mother through the Buddha of the ideals embodied in Christianity, mother through the village community of self-government and democracy. Mother India is in many ways the mother of us all. And that's probably why she was known as Bharatam, which now has become India. And in the process, there has been a loss, I would say. So the conclusion is Sanskrit, is it a yoga? I leave that to you to conclude. And all life is yoga. And maybe all life can be Sanskritized. Thank you very much. Yes. So, Vinaya,
बहु धन्यवादः बहु धन्यवादः अहं वचनशून्योऽस्मि
Okay.
I'm left without words. I have been hearing you for last 10 years, yet every time I hear, I'm carried to a different world. Coming from Sanskrit background, I appreciate and I value each word, each diction that you use in describing the greatness of Sanskrit. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
There are many questions, many compliments. I don't think I'll be able to catch up with the compliments, the long list of compliments that have come through. But just to give a sample of it, we have Madhu Kishwarji again with us, who says, I had decided to reserve my next birth for learning, being rooted in Sanskrit. But after listening to Anuradha, I want to prepare myself for my next birth, starting right away. Have tried several times, found very uninspiring teacher, therefore kept waiting for a real guru, and you have inspired.
Thank you very
I
much.
think this is one feeling that most of our participants, friends are expressing, that they're inspired to take it up now. So I think this session in that way has been extremely successful, not just because it touched them, but it also inspired them to do that effort, to put that effort. So thank you very much for that. There are many questions, but let me, I'm sorry, I have to be a little selective in approaching them. I start with the question, which you actually, you started your whole presentation about sounds and the connectivity with language. So this is a question, it's a beautiful question. It says, if sounds have inherent meaning, is the universe sending messages to us that we do not necessarily perceive with our senses, though the multitude of sounds are through the multitude of sounds around us? Do they cumulatively create effects on our body and mind? And what is the extent to which we can use conscious intention to counteract these effects if negative and enhance if positive?
There were any questions in that? I think
Do they cumulatively, like the sounds which the universe is continuously sending to us, like if they have meaning and if they create effects on our body and mind, what is the extent to which we can use conscious intention to counteract these sound effects if it is negative in nature or enhance if it is positive?
Okay, so I think, I'd like to answer that in a few ways. So first and foremost, one has to recognize that the uttered sound is only the external expression of a deeper vibration. So when we talk of sounds, we need to recognize that everything originates with a vibration, and that vibration finds expression through language. Some languages are carriers of that original vibration, and that's what, when we talk of mantras, so mantras are conveyors of that original experience. So by just chanting certain mantras, one can find one's way back home. So Om to home is much more than just a smart expression. Om to home is a real possibility. Okay. And mantras, the chanting of mantras also helps us make these energy circuits. So I would really like to us to understand or to look at ourselves, our being, as as a collection of various vibratory patterns physically that we have inherited from our parents. These physical patterns also, if you go down deeper, are nothing but they're coming in from the genes. And even within the genetic structure, there are many suppressed patterns and there are many expressed patterns. Those expressed patterns are reinforced by our environment, but we also have certain suppressed patterns. And I think the most suppressed patterns in all of us is our original being, our true nature of freeness. What Ben very beautifully showed Yogi Maheshwar ji the other day. So our most original sound is that freedom of being. And it is retaining that vibration that is more important than sometimes the language that one is using. We see that there are great yogis like Sri Aurobindo and all who wrote a lot in English, but their language is considered as mantric because when they are saying something using the English language, they are communicating a direct experience through that language. So that's why when we read that, we are impacted at a different level of our being. So with all my passion for Sanskrit, I would agree with what Yogiji had said that day, that it is connecting to the vibration that is more important. And somebody who has a right vibration can say abracadabra and they will communicate experience, versus somebody who speaks chaste Sanskrit, everything is perfect, but inside it's all noisy and messy, there will be zero experience. All right. So I think it is very important to keep this perspective of the role and the value that this language plays, but also in the larger understanding of who we are, and use sounds. So even the express sound that I said is, there is a resonance with other vibratory patterns. So thinking, the vibration of our thoughts, the vibrations of our emotions, the vibrations of our uttered word. All right. So if those are aligned, if we are using a word where we're able to easily align that, those words, those sounds will be beneficial for us. Whereas if we are making very pure sounds but are egoistic in ourselves, I mean, there is impurity in our being, who we are, then the purest of uttered sounds will not have an effect. But having said that, my invitation to everybody when I speak about Sanskrit, my invitation is really to surrender oneself to the spirit of this language. Because if one surrenders to the spirit of this language, then it will remold our inner spaces to truth structures. And if I may just add that, is that,
Sure.
I mean, this was a very interesting realization I had with a group when I was doing it in Australia. But it was just this, that if you speak in Sanskrit, so my encouragement for speaking Sanskrit, so if you're uttering words, when we use language, we're adding to the noise of the world in a sense, because we're adding more adding more auditory vibrations into the atmosphere. When we are using, let's say, Sanskrit, which is a very clear sound, which has very I would say gem-like sound productions, because it's very clear cut, then we are creating more clarity around us just by the utterance of that, is what I think. And for people, I mean, a friend of mine, it's a little digressing there, but a friend of mine, again, found that the person was dyslexic. And by saying things in Sanskrit, by learning Sanskrit, it aligned his consciousness in a manner that what I'm saying is what I'm reading is what I'm writing. This alignment gave a sense of confidence, but actually also removed dyslexia for him. It also is used for detecting speech problems. I mean, the benefits, the therapeutic benefits of Sanskrit are another talk for another time. Yes, Vinaya. Please.
As you mentioned, I mean, thank you very much for bringing this idea of alignment, which is the central concept or the central spirit of yoga, right? The same thing, the way it explains the languages also, and especially why Sanskrit, like there could be many rhetorical answers to why Sanskrit is important or beautiful language, but as you mentioned rightly, that it allows one to align oneself, with one's own true being and the thought pattern and the expression through words. I think this answers the last question, can Sanskrit be yoga? So thank you very much for that. And also you were mentioning about the therapeutic effects of Sanskrit language. I'd just like to add a personal note at this moment. Just before we were about to commence the Global Festival of Yoga, I had a very difficult situation in the family with a medical condition of a near dear one. And in the in the post-treatment recovery period, one of the things that was advised to him and which helped him tremendously, the chanting of the alphabets to gain control over the entire the speech and articulation parts of the body. What helped tremendously, what he's still doing, is chanting of the alphabets. I mean, this is just one of the benefits I just wanted to mention. And as you also noted at some point of time, in many traditions, it's used as meditative practice also in the Buddhist traditions, just to chant from to the end. It's many monks sit and do it throughout the day as a meditative practice. So thank you very much for highlighting these aspects. I'll now move on to the next question by Ramakrishnan Sitaramanji. He has a few questions, but I'll be a little mean and just choose one of them. And he has a very interesting way of asking, provoking and asking these questions. He asks, the higher cognitive requirement of Sanskrit then means it is a more difficult and perhaps elitist language, as is alleged by detractors. So, your thoughts and comments on that?
I love the question and I love the formulation as well. Thank you. So, what I have found, because I have had the good fortune of trying to teach this language across different cultural backgrounds, to people from different walks of life. And what has struck me very noticeably that the learning of this language requires a certain childlike simplicity, because the logic of this language is really in the hearing of its logic. If you try to go through it through a mentalized manner, it becomes a very difficult endeavor. Of course, it is very complex. It is the mathematical component of it is demanding. So I'm not trying to say this is an easy language to learn. It's not easy from 2 points of view. One is because its grammar is very demanding. It's just like everybody cannot do pure maths, everybody cannot do hard maths. So it's from that point of view, it is complex. It needs an awakened consciousness, true. And the second one is also from the vocabulary point of view. The vocabulary, the content in this language is enormous. I'll give you an idea. They start in the, I think, Bhandarkar Oriental University Institute in Pune, they started doing a dictionary soon after independence. And they have arrived at more than 90,000 words. And what I had last heard is they were still on the letter A. So the vocabulary and the content in this language is so diverse, it's so technical, that just to get your hands around it, just to get your mind around it is mind-boggling. But in terms of the ease of learning it, if one has a childlike simplicity, it really facilitates it. One has to have a mind that is able to see patterns. So I'll give you an example why I recognize the simplicity of this language from my own experiences, because I was once in Australia and I was teaching a group of Australians the Sanskrit. They've been studying Sanskrit for many years. And at the same time, I was introduced to a person from the indigenous community who was, for some reason, interested in discussing with me and sharing things. And I told him on the first day that, we are doing this class, why don't you join along? And he came on the first day. And the only thing I would do was kushalam and, are you fine and all, some splattering of a few Sanskrit words here and there. On the last, and he came, I think, once in the middle, but he came on the last day. On the last day, we were having more elaborate sentence formations. Now, those who had attended these, the whole week of Sanskrit classes, they were not so confident because of their own apprehensions. Will I get it right? Will I not get it right? So they were making sentences, but there was a lot of hesitation in their formulation of the sentences. But this person, he was very totally present. He just heard the words, he heard the logic, and he was on that very first day being able to make sentences because he was just very present. And I'll give you an example. If I tell you gachami is to go, agachami to come, pathami read, likhami write, eat is khad, what will be the ending? You will spontaneously say khadami. So the more you sound this language, the logic of this language is really in the sounds of this language. That's why the spoken Sanskrit is so recommended. Because if you're trying to just approach it very mentally, it will be a struggle. If you do it spontaneously with a childlike openness, this language will be far more easily acquirable in that case. And in that context, it doesn't become an elitist language. In fact, sometimes the elite people will have even more challenge studying it than somebody who's simply there and say, oh, let's play along with this language. So play. This language is very joyful. So play with the language, play with the creativity it allows. And that is the fabulous part. That is the youth that this language allows us to have. Yes.
I think you have answered this question in many ways, not just by the verbal response, but also the passion that you bring about while speaking about Sanskrit, and all of our friends have been appreciative of it. How did it all start, if I may ask? Because you grew up in a very unconventional manner, even your education system. And also even among that group, it's only one perhaps in hundreds who have come to the life of Sanskrit. So how and where did you start this?
So I had the immense good fortune of having done my education in the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education in Puducherry, which is based on the integral yoga philosophy of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And both Sri Aurobindo and the mother gave a lot of importance to Sanskrit. The mother said that just as every child in France knows French, every child in India must know Sanskrit, but it has to be a simple Sanskrit. And why should a person know Sanskrit? Because as an Indian, it would connect us, it would allow us access to those original sound, to those original concepts that form the foundation of the civilization. And if a child, an Indian, is bereft of that knowledge, they will be forced to look for light outside of their own cultural boundaries. So anybody who is connected to Sanskrit, irrespective of their cultural background, invariably is in awe and has deep respect for the wisdom, the rich treasure trove that exists in the Sanskrit language. On every field, from science to poetry to drama to philosophy to practical things, every aspect of life is available in Sanskrit literature in a systematic manner. That is what the Shastra is. So when one engages with that, it automatically is an uplifting experience for the individual. And that was one. So mother, and therefore, and Sri Aurobindo also says the same thing. He says that the language, Sanskrit language, is the language of India's soul, again. So because of this emphasis that they gave, and I think that very deeply we are patterned, our genetic structures are patterned with the worldview of that is incarnated in the Sanskrit language. And when we start speaking in Sanskrit, when we engage with Sanskrit, it's as if there is a deep resonance from our original sound patterns of our genes and of our verbal utterances of that language. So it's as if on two ways there is a kind of a resonance that gets created. And this is not to exclude people who are from other cultures, because the fact is that the truth of the sound also resonates deeply with the truth of our soul being. So nobody is left out. One cannot be untouched by the truth of these sounds of the language. And that's why every letter is known as aksharam, indestructible. Right? So because of this emphasis by both mother and Sri Aurobindo, they taught Sanskrit from our childhood. So in kindergarten they teach Sanskrit as well as French. So I was, for some reason, attracted by Sanskrit, and I was also attracted to it as a spoken language right from the start. And in the ashram school, they teach it as a living language as well. It's not just learn to mug up and vomit on your exam and to score marks. We didn't have exams, so it was never to score marks. It was always to understand the joy of learning. It makes a big difference. I think as Sanskrit promoters of this language, I think first being convinced of what this language has to offer is so important. And then after that, when I did my higher education, my bachelor's in the ashram school itself, I did my final talk, my dissertation, my bachelor's work on the Vedic hidden chambers of the Vedic truth. So Vedic psychology, looking at Sri Aurobindo's symbolism of the Vedic literature. And it's in that context that Sri Aurobindo has these words. He says that the recovery of the perfect truth of the Vedas is not merely a desideratum of modern intellectual curiosity, but a practical necessity of the human race. And he talks about the Vedas, and in the Vedic Vedas itself, there's a line that says, knowing which everything here is known. Yasmin vijñate sarvam idam vijñatam. So I said, if there is such a knowledge, there's a body of knowledge knowing which everything is known, it becomes worth pursuing that. And on the other side, I had fortunately, like really fortunately, read the shloka from the Panchatantra, which says that praptavyam artham labhate manushyaha, that the money that you have to get, you will get, human beings will get. Devopi tam langhayitum na shaktaha, even the gods cannot change that. Tasmat na shochami na vismayome. That's why I'm not worried, nor am I surprised. Yadasmadiyam nahitat paresham. What has to be mine will not be anybody else's. So I think this engendered an inherent sense of trust on my gurus, a trust in what the universe has to do. I said, if I have to invest my lifetime doing something and there is no money, if I think I'm going to do management or engineering and there is no money written in my forehead, I'm neither going to get the money and I would have wasted my whole life studying something I'm not interested in. But I'm passionate about Sanskrit, and I know that the knowledge it will give me is the shortcut to everything. So if I invest my life in Sanskrit and no money is written, no problem. I would have at least lived my life to its fullest. And God has been very kind by giving me an opportunity in IIT where one can reach out this learning, this vast literature, help youngsters get a little bit of taste of this gem that we have as a cultural inheritance.
Thank you very much for that, taking us through your personal journey. In fact, you addressed one of the questions I intended to ask, because those who know you from close quarters, they know you were not in this job or this kind of a job for many years. It's just recently that you have been into this, and you have always been a Sanskrit gypsy, a passionate Sanskrit gypsy, not worried about money or anything. And you have traveled nations, like sometimes in just 2-3 days, you have hopped between 3-4 nations, and you have lived a life where people in the corporate might also have found it difficult. Going to that many people, reaching out to that many nations. So, just any words that you'd like to share on that?
I think one of the reasons why I came to places like Kharagpur is because in this Indian Institute of Technology, which is one of the premium institutes of engineering, I think as a modern society, we have had lopsided preferences in the education and the development of our being. More so with only a very technological bent in institutes like this, while we have humanities departments and we are trying very hard to help them acquire a more balanced personality. I also believe that students who go out of here are very spontaneously lured by the glamours of material success and prosperity, which takes them to shores beyond the Indian soil. And these people, because of the education they receive here, because of the exposure they have here, become thought leaders of the world. In fact, we are very lucky that a lot of IIT Kharagpurians occupy many important posts around the world. So one of the attractions for me to come here, there were two reasons. The first one was because I wanted to see how one could maybe plant these seeds of love for the nation, love for a culture, not in a parochial narrow sense, because the Indian civilizational thought, the deeper one goes into it, the wider one gets in one's spirit. So how can we help them connect deeper with the soil of this land, the spirit of this land, so that having touched that, they will then fly freely anywhere and still remain grounded in being. So, and then when they become leaders, hopefully carry some of that joy, some of that light, some of that within them and share that with others. That was one. And the second is because Indian civilization has had extensive literature on in science and technology, which we have not circumstantially been able to explore because the Sanskrit language has not received its due importance in our education system. So as a result, we are always looking again for knowledge to come from other shows to enlighten us about scientific developments. Not that there isn't there. I mean, when I'm making these statements, it's never to belittle any other civilization or their findings, but it is just to say that I've, in the course of my travels, also learned that a lot of the discoveries that are presented in a certain mold have the sources in Indian texts. And that is painful. It is painful sometimes to find that the knowledge that we are sitting on, I tell this to my students sometimes, it's really as if we are sitting on piles of wealth and we are like impoverished beggars putting our hands out to the world for a few coins, a few glittering things from there, instead of looking at what is really below us, beneath us, and which is our inheritance. So, and very often it's the same gold that has been battered in different ways and fed back, so, which we enjoy. So I think it's an unfortunate reality. So we've started this course along with Professor Parthapratim Chakraborty and many other professors with their goodwill and support. We are running this course, History of Science and Technology in Ancient India, where we are trying to help students understand the contributions of the Indic civilization in this domain of science and technologies. We have structures like the Kailashnath temple, where in today with all, it's a monolithic temple structure, but today with all our technology, we are unable to even fathom how they did it. So what was the literature? What was the mind that allowed them to come up with that? So can we literally set ablaze the mind of our youngsters to want to delve and find out, come up with new research, and also to share with them modern techniques that are being evolved. So it's not about only going back to the past, but grounded in the present, grounded in the past, how can we look towards a brighter future for the world? This knowledge is valuable for the world. It's not only for Indians. I mean, the Vedic Rishi was never interested in having a monopoly about this culture, about the Indian civilization. The Vedic Rishi was looking at humanity. It was looking at how humanity can progress for a better world.
As one of our earlier speakers said, it's not about copywriting, but copy left. It has left for the world. Thank you, Anuji, for these wonderful insights. Even as you were responding to these questions or these statements, there were some universal truths you were expressing. A couple of them, if I can mention, is that you said that the deeper one goes into the Indian thought, the wider will be his perspective and all embracing would be his approach. I think this is so true because we have friends who come from Europe and many other parts who have their own religious traditions. And many of them who have been practicing Vedanta or yoga, they have shared with us that it's through Vedanta they have discovered their own religion, understood their own religion much better. So I think getting into this thought, which has touched that universal chord, helps people to connect to their own traditions in a much authentic manner. So thank you for bringing this out. And also, I'm reminded of other statement that you made earlier, especially both in time of describing the nature of words and sentence formation. You said one experience and multiple expressions. This again is connected back to the Rigvedic thought, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. I think this is the quintessential thinking in the Indian tradition. Can you elaborate a little more on this, please?
I think if one looks at the world, huh, and also from a Vedic lens, really, one identifies immediately, or one realizes that this world is a multi-layered world. So it's like a light that when it shines through something, it will have various fragmented reflections. Those reflections are myriad, but the source is the same. So how can we connect back to that source which has these multiple reflections? In every context, we see that the vibration is finding an expression through the different densities of consciousness, if I may put it like that. That a vibration finds its expression through the different densities of our consciousness. And because it is going through different densities of consciousness, the expressions will be diverse. But because the expressions are diverse doesn't mean that the source is different. So, ekam sad vipra bahudha vadanti. The truly wise are not carried away by the differences of expressions, but recognize that they are only different forms of that common thing, and that each form is unique and important in itself. Because it is different doesn't make it less important. And each form becomes a valid means to return to the source. If one sticks to it, that abhyasa is important and vairagya is important. So how do we stick to the source and take it back? How do we stick to the external expression and then lead the way back to the source? That is the question.
I would also like to connect this to your thesis in your MLitt, which you had worked on the languages of Europe. And you had made this observation that while many languages that came from Latin today are independent nation states, and you compared it with Sanskrit, that many language or most of the languages that emerged out of Sanskrit, they're still part of one unit.
Yes,
what was this observation, and you share a little more about it?
So I was studying social linguistics when I did my MLitt. And while doing the study of social linguistics, we were trying to identify language families. And we attribute the origin of Sanskrit and Latin, let's say, to, there is the current thinking on that is that there is a Proto-Indo-European, which precedes, or which is like the...
Which is also being questioned and...
also being questioned.
Debated.
Once I was in Greece and I asked I was talking to a Greek scholar, and when I said that I do Sanskrit, he said there's no doubt that it is the mother of Greek as well. So there are multiple theories, but let's take this theory where it says that there is a Proto-Indo-European language from which Sanskrit and Latin emerged, Latin and Greek. And from Latin and Greek, we see that all the European languages emerged. So you have the Italian, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the German has a different root, but at least these Romanesque languages that were there. And on the other side, you had Sanskrit, and you had the regional languages that emerged from there, the Pali, the Prakrit, Pali, all of that. And then the regional languages further down with Bengali, Hindi, Gujarati, etc. Tamil again is a language which Sri Aurobindo says has its own root, which has not derived from Sanskrit, but which has, there have been a lot of borrowing from the Sanskrit language in terms of vocabulary and all, but it is its independent origin as well. So what was very interesting for me was to see that under the Romanesque languages, each of those languages that were derivatives had become an independent country. Whereas all the languages under Sanskrit had retained that oneness under one umbrella. And again, going back to that, it seems like there is one truth, many names, kind of a thing. And also the fact that Sanskrit can act as a huge unifier for this nation. Because if we can go back to Sanskrit, go back to the mother instead of fighting amongst the children. If we can return to our mother and allow ourselves to be nourished by her and not try to appropriate her by communities, whoever. I mean, there are these allegations which are not so true either, because we see that even Ambedkar was also, who is the father of the Dalit movement, he was also brought up by a Brahmin scholar who gave him his name. And Ambedkar himself was a great Sanskrit scholar. So there is no, at the root, there is no intrinsic animosity. In fact, when the language was, the national language was being discussed, when the constitution was being framed, Ambedkar said, why not Sanskrit? So the value that this language has for our nation is enormous. It will nourish all regional languages. It will brighten the minds, because now as a nation which has only this much of a history, we will become a nation with that much of a vocabulary. And if all, can you imagine every Indian learning Sanskrit, what that would be, that would do to the access to the knowledge treasure we would have. It seems there are at least 4 to 30 million manuscripts that are yet to be uncoded. The volume of knowledge, accumulated knowledge over generations, over time, lying untapped because we do not have the expertise. We don't have the knowledge, nor do we have the technical expertise. So marrying that is the need of the hour. We need Sanskrit for good and technical modern languages.
Sure. See, thank you very much for this answer, but it makes sense why Indians should invest in Sanskrit. But why should others also, like those who, for whom this is not part of their heritage, because you travel to Europe, you travel to many other places, you teach Sanskrit. You were also teaching at John Scottus School in Ireland for some time, where Sanskrit teaching is compulsory in that school. So why would you advocate Sanskrit for even for those for whom this is not part of their heritage and tradition?
A very simple benefit is you speak Sanskrit, you will have good health. I'm joking. I mean, I'm making it sound very simplistic, but I think there are tremendous ancillary benefits of using this language. I think people who are not directly from this culture also, if they knew Sanskrit, would be enriched, would be greatly enriched by their exposure to the literature that Sanskrit has. That would probably be the first attraction. And especially in the yoga world, we have thousands of texts with detailed documentations of these psychological processes leading to the spiritual realizations that have been done in Sanskrit literature. So the challenge for people, I'll talk about the yoga world because that's the group that we are addressing now, is that if you're reading translations, you're invariably limited by an interpretation of that translation. Invariably. And understanding the source word, understanding the source language will enhance your understanding also of the psychological processes. Like yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. Vritti comes from vrit, to turn around. It's a circular thing. And it also is a coverer. So what are these coverings of our mind? But normally you would understand it as modulations, modifications, movements, which it doesn't take us back to the source. And if you're reading two translations that have very different meaning, you would not know which one to rely on, because in the English language, they mean two quite different things. Whereas if you go to the source and you see that you have chitta vritti, so it implies these modulations, which are these movements, which are coverers, which are patterns, which are circular patterns. Our thoughts are circular patterns. So how do you overcome all of that? And ahankara is nothing but when you keep doing aham, I. So understanding that word it's not just the ego. It is this doing of I. So just not doing I in everything is already a step towards, probably, I mean, these are simplistic generalizations, I must admit, because you can even have an ahankara of not saying ahankara, aham. You know, one who says that I don't do aham can also be very egoistic. So one has to be very clear about the nuances of the implications of what I'm saying. But for the Western world, for the world that is not directly from an Indian culture, the need for Sanskrit is very important because one would give you access to the direct, to unlock this treasure trove directly, rather than look for somebody else who then has the key and then you look for another person who has the key. Just pick up this key and open this door.
Thank you very much for putting things in such wonderful perspectives. Like as an Indian, for all our Indian friends, it is important for many reasons, and also because it's part of their heritage. You connect with your tradition, and so that you build a bright future. But also for others, as you rightly said, it is something that allows them to a deeper experience of things, to access text directly without any kind of distortion, omission, or commission. I think, and also like the way you said about the mantras, which is of a universal experience. The nature of mantra is universal because many of your workshops people participate without any access to the meaning, yet they share their experiences at the end, which I think speaks from a language beyond the words also. So Sanskrit is also one such experience. You want to say something about it?
I would say that the Sanskrit work is really about an energy work. And I'm getting more and more convinced about this, that speaking in Sanskrit is not just about communicating or creating realities outside of oneself, but it is also a very systematic energy work within oneself, of these different petals with the different chakras, and also this brain massage that one is doing. So one is sharpening one's mind with a mere usage of this tool. It's like if you want to cut something, you can just pick up a knife and cut it. But if you want to do surgery, you have to use a very fine scalpel. You have to have the skill of your fingers. So Sanskrit is like the surgery. It allows this very fine working in order to do very intricate work. It makes your mind, it forces your mind to become very skilled, Sanskritam, in order to do anything. And that also finds its reflection in other activities that one does. And I would just like to mention here the concept of dharma, because we've talked of surgery and all. We had this concept of the satya of the hand, of the blueprint. So the way I understand dharma, and I'll link it to what I just said, is that dharma is when you are able to do the right thing. So for example, I'll give you the instance of the hand. So if you want to wear a glove, you will not just go and you want to do surgery. You will not tell someone to go and buy a glove for you. Because if it's a too big a glove, it will be clumsy. The work you will do will be clumsy. If it's too small, it will be too constricted. So in order to do the right work in the best possible manner, you have to know the contours of your hand, which is your hand uniquely. Then wear a glove that will fit it identically. When the glove fits that hand identically, the hand will be held in the best way possible to then do whichever work you do in the most optimum manner. This optimum, so if I can take the order back, so the shape of the hand is the satya, the wearing of the glove identically in manifestation is rita, the upholding of the hand in the best way is dharma, and when you do an action, it will be the most effective if you have the skill, and that is brihat, the vast, and that will give you the joy, sukha, that you will have of that work. So Sanskrit, if you do Sanskrit well, is like the upholding of yourself to the highest possible. So if you pronounce things right, you have the grammar right, the being is upheld in a certain manner. In the spirit, when I'm talking of all of this, I'm really talking of the spirit. There are Sanskritists who are of the worst kind of human beings as well. So it will not automatically do it. One has to allow the spirit of this language to touch one's being, to experience these benefits. And the tragedy with us is that we are always in adharma, wearing these clumsy gloves. And that's the nature of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the age when the right is not applied. And therefore the adharma abounds. All clumsy gloves everywhere. And that's why the motto of this land, which is Satyam Eva Jayate Nanritam, truth alone. That if you know the blueprint, and you're able to do the blueprint, then it will give you the best result. You will be victorious. So I think from our motto, when we took out the Nanritam, we did ourselves a disservice, because we got caught up with the subjectivization of that. What is truth? Your truth, my truth? No, no, no. The Mundaka Upanishad that has this line was talking about the right, the optimum blueprint of anything. If we know that, we're able to do that, we will get the best results. And that's why this land was the Soneka Chiriya. This land was the land of prosperity. Samriddhi will be natural.
Thank you, Anuji, once again. We are running out of time. I'm sorry I won't be able to take many other questions. But just to give you a sense, we have questions on pronunciations. How do you pronounce a particular sound? There were also questions on scripts. We have Brahmi script, we have Sharda scripts. So just in the interest of time, I apologize to all our participants. I'm not able to take all those questions. But just a couple of...
Can I just
Yes.
say, so they say, I've not seen this or not have I read this article, but it is said that if you could take a picture of the sound of the letters, of the aksharas, they would resemble the Devanagari script. So, and therefore when you're writing, when you're drawing out the symbols, it is as good as you were sounding, as good as if you were sounding the letters. And the School of Practical Philosophy and Economic Sciences, they actually do this as a meditation where they just draw out the letters and experience a meditative state.
So just because you brought up the school, I would like to mention that there is this School of Philosophy and Economic Science that started in UK, and they are present over at least some 10, 12 countries. They have schools for adults, schools for children, and one of such schools is in Ireland, John Scottus School, where teaching of Sanskrit is compulsory for all their children. Every child in its primary education undergoes through Sanskrit training. They chant so beautifully, they write, they speak so beautifully. So please look up on the internet and find out and try to connect with these schools that are there. Yes, Sanuji. So coming back, I'm still tempted to take these two, three questions because they're so important. We'll just do them quickly. One is because you were speaking about the importance of languages and Sanskrit. And today we are in an age where we take a very utilitarian perspective of language. Hardly we invest on it. The language education stops at high school, or at most it carried to first year or second year above the high school, and university, hardly people pursue it. How do we motivate youngsters, more than youngsters, their parents, to invest in language and the rich reward it promises?
It's a tough question. One, because in the course of Kali Yuga, we have become so externalized in our consciousness, which is also evident from the fact that we no longer like to remember things, we put them onto our gadgets. So from being the source of ideas, originators, we have in different ways trickled down into becoming producers of things alone. No? So our consciousness has got very externalized, and therefore the interest of the present civilization is in doing things that are in the world of havings, not so much in the world of being. So if I think one way of addressing this would be to try and show them that if you invest in this, if you invest in learning languages, it can help you to have more. So just address the mind at the level that it is, rather than try to talk of it of something spiritual. So you want a good job, you have good communication skills. If you have good grammar, you will have better communication skills. You'll have more confidence. You will do what you want to do. That's it. So learn a language well. Very simple. And I think parents also would want that, because every parent wants to see their child successful. So I think language has that very important role of allowing an individual their sammanam. And very interestingly, the word sammanam also, because it means what is the measure of yourself. So most of us measure ourselves to the extent that the way the world measures us. So my measure is the way the world looks at me, and that is, so if they tell me something that to make me small, I become small. But sammanam tells us what is our measure from all directions. And that is really an internal thing. So if one can help a person understand, give the youngsters a taste that, especially languages like Sanskrit, which has multiple benefits. It makes your mind computer-like. It helps you acquire different languages because it fine-tunes the hearing and speech mechanism. So this fine-tuning helps. So I would attribute a lot of my ease of learning foreign languages to and different languages to the background, to the base that I have in Sanskrit. And this is something that you will hear scholars always have spoken about how Sanskrit has helped them pick up English language very well. And I remember there was either a judge or someone from the south of India who was asked by a Britisher, how do you speak such good English? He says, because I have a good background of Sanskrit. So the moment you listen to a word, the brain automatically knows where to put it, which file, which box, where to put it. And then when you are using the language, the brain does all its calculations. Achha, this, then, that is how. So it can be a help. So it can be a help physiologically. Like I said, it's a brain massage. It keeps you fit. It can be a help in terms of forming your mind to make it sharper, to be more disciplined. It can help you linguistically. So in terms of professions, you can get jobs if you are able to pick up language soon. If you have Sanskrit, in my case, there's so many people who tell me that, the moment I have Sanskrit, people think that, wow, what a fantastic thing. So if that is the sammanam, the weight, the prestige that this language holds, then that is another catch of this language. So for Sanskrit, yes. And then for every other language, a language skill gives confidence. And confidence
So,
can get you anywhere in the world.
rapid fire question: how many languages do you know and speak?
Oh,
Indian and foreign languages.
about 8 to 10, yeah.
You want to quickly list them?
All right, very quickly, if you want me to do that. So I'll start with Sanskrit, Bengali, Hindi, Tamil, a little bit of Kannada. I understand and speak a little bit of Oriya, maybe a little bit, and understand several other Indian languages. But of the foreign languages, there is English, French, Italian. I understand some Spanish. I've done some Dutch some time back. So I've done some Latin, I would say. Greek, not so much, but Latin a little more. So little bit. But what I would really say that it's the Sanskrit language that has, in my case at least, facilitated the grasping of other languages.
I think this is a very important message. Like while we are getting into this utilitarian perspective to understand the value of learning languages at a very young age, and also today the research in neurology and neuroscientific perspectives tell us that if you help children to pick up language at a very young age, if you invest in 2-3 languages, they just get the grammar of the lingua franca, like any other language. As you were saying, it will be easy for them to pick it up. Therefore, I mean, one of the things we really would like to urge all our participants here, like you have been asking, many of you have been commenting that, oh, they should make Sanskrit compulsory in the schools. I mean, that is actually secondary importance. Whether they make it compulsory or not, it doesn't matter. No, nothing will stop us from investing ourselves. No, I agree with it should be made, but we can't fight. Like I've been part of national education policy, the newly drafted national education policy, and I know the challenges of bringing or forcing anything like that. I mean, India, it's a very unique country the way it stands out today. So there are many, many challenges. While I am for it, I also am familiar with it. So just because it's not made compulsory in the school, it's almost like outsourcing your responsibility that someone should make it compulsory from outside so that we pick it up. No one is stopping us from picking it up ourselves. Today, we have a umpteen number of sources, many online programs. If just there is a small wish, we can really reach out to teachers, excellent teachers like Anuradha Ji. I'll also request her to share about her courses, which she offers online, and that too for free. They're all available. So please make use of all those things and don't wait till the day it is made compulsory in any school or in any part of the world. That is not required. And all these days, Sanskrit has been kept alive because there have also been questions on Sanskrit being a Mrita Bhasha or a dead language. There might be academic papers on that. I also would like to solicit your views on that, Anuji. But before that, there might be papers like that. But Sanskrit is alive in each one of us. And when we are speaking our regional languages, you can see how Sanskrit has nourished all the Indian languages. take any language for that matter, 60 to 90%, even language like Malayali has about 90% Sanskrit words. So in this way, Sanskrit has been the mother language, and as a mother, she is selflessly feeding, nourishing all her children, that she has really helped them grow, evolve out of her bosom. So please, you don't have to wait for it to be made compulsory. This is only a request from my side. And Anuji, I want to get back to you about your comments on, because this is a question that many people face. Oh, Sanskrit is a dead language. Like, having heard you, I don't think anyone can even say the D of the dead language. So your thoughts on that?
So very quickly, so like David Frawley also said in the quotation that I read out from him, he said that it has been one of the most continuously used languages from 6000 BC, almost one can say. But I think, I mean, this is my thought on it, and one could disagree with it also, is that a language is connected to the age in which it is being used. So as time went on, from the Vedic period and time went on, the mind also changed. Sanskrit has a huge demand on upholding our attention. It's a very mindful language in that. So it requires us to uphold our attention. If communication becomes primary to correctness, it will give rise to adjustments. It will give rise to compromises. And it is those compromises that then become the children of Sanskrit. So while the vocabulary gets retained, there is compromise in terms of the correctness of the sound. There is compromise in terms of maybe the meaning that has got a bit more distanced, because there is not enough effort to understand the root sound, their effect, their experiential effect. So there is circumstantial meaning that is attributed to words. Associated sense is given to a word. So as the age becomes more mentalized and utilitarian, I would say, where communication becomes primary to truth of things, one will automatically move towards easier expression. That is what I would say, easier expression. And therefore we see why Sanskrit has lost the importance that it had in society previously. And I don't think it is so far back also that we did not have it. I think it's also the fact of being under invasion for over 1,000 years that we've had our systems, our educational systems have undergone certain disruptions. And there were, with the colonial coming in of the colonial Raj, there was a conscious effort to disengage or to divorce the population from its source knowledge texts. And so those concerted efforts to cut the link between people and their knowledge traditions, and thereby facilitate manipulations, has also led also to the impoverishment of the use of this language. But to say it was a dead language is completely not right, because what is his name now? Monia Williams, who wrote what is currently the most authoritative Sanskrit to English dictionary, he says that, this is in 1832 or so, he says, I've traveled the length and breadth of India, and I've had people from all backgrounds, from all regions, ready to talk to me in Sanskrit. And we know that in today's context, there are many discussions that you can have on the Shastra that are very difficult to be done in different languages. It's because the vocabulary of Sanskrit is very technical. It allows an easier conversation on certain very advanced thought expressions. Like in the Nyaya, I mean, I'll not take much time, in very brief, I will just explain this, that the Nyaya philosophy has the concept of potness. So pot, what is the quality of pot? Potness. So ghata, ghatatvam. They have arguments on ghatatvam tvam. What is the potness of the pot? I mean, it's in English, it starts sounding absurd beyond potness. But in the Nyaya Shastra, they have pushed intellectual reasoning to that extent that they're talking of the potnessness of the pot and the absence of the potnessness of the pot in the clothnessness of the cloth. It's a mind-blowing literature. But you see that the language facilitates a certain discussion. And therefore, this discussion is very much alive in circles today. So to say it's a dead language is not true. We have villages today that are using Sanskrit as the language of their people. There are more and more families. Thanks. I mean, I would do injustice if I did not mention the work of Sanskrit Bharati. There are many scholars, there are many organizations. Sanskrit Bharati has had a yeoman's effort in bringing back Sanskrit as a spoken language to the households, to hundreds and thousands of households of India and of the world. So great efforts, and I've been a volunteer with them, and I've seen how this method that they use of simple spoken Sanskrit can transform not just the person's language ability, but transform them from being meek mice to lionesses. So it's amazing what the language can do.
So thank you, Anuji. We just have no words, but I'll borrow the words of our participants to share the gratitude. This is from Sabrina, who says, beautiful and inspiring exposition of the qualities of Sanskritam. Thank you, Professor Choudry ji. Then we have our own D.V. Sridharan ji, who says, Dr. Anu's eagerness to share her passion for Sanskrit is most endearing and moving. Pity Zoom doesn't have a way of sending our collective applause for Dr. Anu's talk. It was really a great performance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
then
much.
we have Genevieve, who says, okay, Anuradha, you sold me into learning Sanskrit. What's the best methodology? And do you teach international groups in some way or the other? Love the passion you bring into this, Vinita ji. So the list is long, but nevertheless, the feelings have been expressed. So thank you very much. We come to this important question. Where can people learn Sanskrit? What are your suggestions, guidelines for that? And lastly, how can people contact you? And then what is your message before we wind up this session? So maybe you can key in some details as we announce the programs of the next day, even of the institutions. And when we come back, you can mention about it. So we'll be back with you soon. Ramprasad ji, can I request you to kindly take us through the programs for tomorrow? So today we complete the 30th day of the festival. Initially it was up to this day, but because of the response, we are extending it for next 11 days up till the end of this month. Just to give you a little glimpse into the statistics of the events that have happened so far. So far we have about 90 sessions, about 50 experiential and theoretical sessions, about 30 practical sessions, and about 10 panel discussion sessions. So this is in brief. About 125 teachers have come on our platform so far, and nearly representing about 30 countries from across the globe. They have been a participant. I really don't know which country or which few countries have been left out. That's the number of participation. And altogether, we have had more than 5,000 people for the morning sessions, for the noon sessions, and evening sessions. Much more than 6,000 participants who had joined us in this 30 days journey. And from tomorrow onwards, we will be having only 2 sessions, the morning session and the evening session. Again, we have an excellent lineup of speakers, teachers, experts who will be coming with us tomorrow. From tomorrow onwards, tomorrow morning, we have Sri Ladislav Grossman, who is a violinist and music teacher at Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, Puducherry, who will be leading the session on music and consciousness. We have had several sessions on Nada Yoga. I would like to add at this point, we ensured or we attempted at looking at all aspects of yoga, not leaving anything. Today we had about speech. So speaking can be yoga. We had a session on eating. Eating can be yoga. Walking, we had a session on walking yoga. So walking could be yoga. Of course, what we do on the yoga mat is yoga, but how yoga can extend to every aspect of life beyond the mat. That was our quest. And we were fortunate enough to have teachers like that who could help us appreciate, understand that yoga embraces every aspect of life. And in the evening, We have tomorrow evening, we have Chirayu Thakkar, who is again a very renowned yoga teacher, a holistic physician, who is also a yoga and naturopath doctor, who will be leading an interactive session on subtle details in the practice of yogasana. That will be between 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. IST. So I invite you all to join us for these two sessions and also continue this journey along. So with this, I now come back to Anuradha ji uh, for about to tell us about the institutions or sources from where we can learn Sanskrit, and also how people can reach out to you. I think this is one big question that we had, it being repeated again and again. How can people reach out to you? And then what is a message that you would like to leave our participants, our friends with?
Thank you, Vinay. I'm just trying to key in the different organizations that do teach Sanskrit. So there is Vyoma Pathashala, there's Open Pathashala, they all do it. And of course, there is Samskrita Bharati. So it would be best to reach out.
Anuradha ji's course are available on NPTEL. That is a national network of various courses that has been put up by MHRD in collaboration with the premier institutes of the country. So she has been offering many courses on spoken Sanskrit. All those courses are available there. We have Yoga Anytime, which is a subscribed channel where she has taught a few courses on Sanskrit, the Sanskrit as Matra Bhasha, and many other courses. Then we have Open Pathashala, again an online forum. Then we have Sanskrit from Home, and then we have Sanskrit Bharati. And there's also one more institute called Vyoma. I think we can also send the details of it. They are based out of Bangalore, but they offer excellent sessions, excellent teaching on Sanskrit and all related aspects of the Shastras. So these are few of the programs, courses that are available, but there are many, many institutions. We just need to look for it. I mean, if I just can add, because we had a discussion on whether Sanskrit is a dead language. Recently, there is also an animated movie called Punya Koti that has come up in Sanskrit. A very beautiful movie, a cute movie, which you can show to your children and help them connect with the folk stories. Punya Koti is a very important folk story of Karnataka, of Kannada, and a software engineer has took enormous efforts to bring it into animation. So we are just seeing a new era being ushered in by the efforts of hundreds and thousands of selfless people, where the future of Sanskrit is only more and more promising.
Yes, I think Vinaya has got stuck on that. We'll wait for him to come back. But I would just like to mention in the meanwhile that that there are free online courses by me that are there. So there is introduction.
Anuji?
Yes, Vinaya. We lost you for a while. I'll continue. So we have this introduction to basic spoken Sanskrit that is available for free online. It's a 10-hour course that you can do. I have another one coming up, intermediate level of intermediate level of spoken Sanskrit, which is a 20-hour course, which has got postponed to September, and it can be found on the Swayam platform. I will just share that with you. I also wanted to mention swayam.gov.in, gov.in. And we also have Dr. Sampadananda Mishra, who was here with us, who spoke on Chando Yoga in the first week of the festival. And he also offers courses that are there. And you can find him on SAFIC, SAFIC, Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Sri Aurobindo SAFIC. I'll just write that. If you look this up, Sri Aurobindo Society, you will find him, you will find him there. And he's got some excellent collections of texts called the Vande Mataram Trust. So people who would like to listen to the Gita, listen to the Vedas, listen to all of that. He's got an excellent set of chanting, as well as detailed analysis of the texts that are available there. So there is a lot of work that is happening. There are people who say it's a dead language. We have a dedicated Sanskrit channel where they have news and different programs on Sanskrit. There are Sudharma and different newspapers that have been running for the last 50, 60 years. There are also new magazines coming up, new literature, children's literature that is creating. So to say that Sanskrit is a dead language is, it's just a matter of not being aware of the extent of work that is coming up in the Sanskrit world. And the most heartening thing is that we have a lot of young entrepreneurs, young, these techies who are turning to Sanskrit because of the fabulous possibilities it offers them in terms of nourishing their soul, nourishing their mind, and making them look smarter than as smart as they would like to look. Yes. Vinay, you're muted.
We are just waiting for that, the nectar, the last part of the message to come. And I really would like to express my gratitude and apologies for all our participants. It's more than 2.5 hours, nearing 3 hours, yet you have stayed with us with all your patience, your love and goodwill. So we are humbled and thank you so much for this. Anuji, back to you for your words.
I will just, one is that Swami Vivekananda gave it a great status. I would like to just read out what he wrote there because that is very, very inspiring. Role of Sanskrit. I'd just like to read out because it's much more powerful when we listen to him saying it. So he says that the only safety, and he's talking in the Indian context, he says the only safety, I tell you, men who belong to the lower caste, the only way to raise your condition is to study Sanskrit. Why do you not become Sanskrit scholars? Why do you not spend millions to bring Sanskrit education to all castes of India? That is the question. The moment you do these things, you are equal to the Brahmin. And then this is the message for everybody who has been listening. The very sound of the Sanskrit words gives a prestige and a power and a strength to the race. Sanskrit and prestige go together in India. As soon as you have that, none dare say anything against you. And a more general message for our friends from different parts of the world is, I have a dream. And that dream is that one day Sanskrit will be the lingua franca of the yoga world, because it is the greatest sense of empowerment that the yoga practitioner, the yoga sadhaka, can feel when they can connect to the source texts that are the foundations of this very deep tradition of self-knowledge and self-realization. This realization is not dependent on Sanskrit, but Sanskrit can be a very valuable tool to help us reconnect to that source within and to the literature without, as Sanskrit yoga. So I think with these words, I would really like to express my humble and deep gratitude to Hari Kiran Badlamani ji once more for creating this platform and for allowing us from different parts of the world to connect with each other on a theme that is fundamental, that is core to who we are as human beings and why we are here on this journey. So my humble gratitudes, and also to Vinaya for your very warm anchoring of my session. And we have a long journey together, but thank you very much for being as excited listening to what I've said 100 times at least, if not 1,000, and yet finding meaning, new meaning in this sharing. And it would be unfair if I did not thank our participants who have really stretched themselves also to listen to one of the greatest, to listen to the beautiful offerings, or to the power and beauty of one of the greatest inheritances that we have as a human civilization, and that is the Sanskrit language. So, Sanskritam Pathantu, study Sanskrit, Sanskritam vadantu, speak Sanskrit. Sanskritam Jivanamayam kurvantu, or Jivanam Sanskritamayam kurvantu. So make your lives full of Sanskrit. There's a very nice song, and I'll end on that note here. It says, Samskritena sambhashanam kuru, Jivanasya parivartanam kuru. Yatra yatra gachasi pashya tatra sanskritam sanskritehe samrakshanam kuru sanskritena sambhashanam kuru. So it says, speak Sanskrit. Then wherever you go, look at Sanskrit and change your life with this language. So I think I can go on, and many of you will generously sit here, but thank you very much. Yeah. Look forward to meeting on another platform. Do study Sanskrit. It really,
Soon.
it really is worth the investment. It is one investment you will never ever regret in your life. And it is never too late. And the sooner the better.
Thank you very much. I'll just borrow a word again from our participants and say this. Rajendra ji and few others have expressed this. You are a gem, you are a jewel that the mother and Sri Aurobindo has crafted for the good of humanity, for the work of Sanskrit. Be blessed and continue your work.
Yes, I'm grateful to my parents, to my gurus, to your parents who are like my parents, to everybody for the blessing and the generosity of your kindness.
Dhanyawad.
Punar milamaha. We'll meet again. So repeat that. Punar milamaha.
Just a last announcements to all our participants as we are concluding. From Indica Yoga, we plan to bring courses and we'll have many courses. So do stay tuned to all our courses that will follow soon.